The city sprawled beneath her, a glittering maze of lights and shadows, but inside, her world felt strangely confined. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching as dawn crept over the skyline, her lean figure silhouetted against the neon haze. The apartment was the epitome of luxury minimalist furniture. Smart systems embedded seamlessly into every corner, and a silence so profound it pressed against her ears like a weight. She was supposed to feel at home here. After all, this was the life she had carved out for herself, off-grid. Yet perched high above the city's chaos in the most exclusive skyscraper downtown. But something was already wrong. The smart lighting flickered, a subtle glitch that pulsed rhythmically, as if the building itself were breathing or watching. Layla frowned, rubbing her temple, the unease settling like a stone. Her fingers tapped rapidly against the sleek glass console on the wall, bringing up the apartment's digital controls. The interface responded sluggishly, the colors momentarily shifting into static before settling back. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the first twinge of paranoia. Had she brought this on herself by moving into a place that seemed too perfect? Her first encounter with the building staff was equally unsettling. Mildred Hayes, the concierge, was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Layla asked casually about the building's floors, Mildred's smile tightened. "There's nothing below the usual basements, dear," she said, voice low, almost rehearsed. But the flicker of hesitation betrayed her. Layla pressed. "Are you sure? I heard some odd noises coming from the lower levels just last night." Mildred's gaze darted away, her fingers clutching the edge of the counter. "Old pipes, maybe. This building's been through renovations, nothing to worry about." But the denial felt brittle, like a pane of glass ready to shatter. Layla's instincts screamed that there was a secret, one buried deep beneath the polished surface. Back in her apartment, she connected her laptop to the building's network. Her screen flooded with encrypted data packets and firewalls layered thick as armor. Her heartbeat quickened. This was no ordinary residential system. She began to navigate the digital labyrinth, her fingers flying over the keyboard, eyes sharp and unyielding. Every firewall she breached revealed another layer of concealment, a digital veil hiding something substantial. As night fell, the skyscraper transformed. The hum of machinery and distant voices filtered up from the depths, muffled but persistent. Layla wandered the sterile corridors, the elevator panels' glitching floor numbers skipping, flickering as though erasing themselves from existence. Her footsteps echoed, a solitary rhythm against the silence. Her fragmented memories, already fragile from years of running and hiding, fluttered uncomfortably at the edges of her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, or worse, that something was rewriting the story of her own past. Her curiosity was no longer a luxury. It was a necessity. Somewhere beneath the skyscraper's shimmering facade lay a secret, and Leela Morgan was determined to uncover it no matter the cost. As she settled back at her desk, the screen blinked once more, a final warning or an invitation. The game had begun. Though the building was a marvel of modern architecture, inside her minimalist space, the atmosphere was a contrasting blend of cold technology and quiet isolation. Layla sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open before her like a portal into the digital underworld she knew so well. Lines of code streamed down multiple screens, cascading like a waterfall of ones and zeros, a language only she could truly understand. Her fingers moved with practiced agility, slicing through virtual layers of security that guarded the skyscraper's network. At first glance, the building's digital infrastructure seemed typical for a place of such high value. Encrypted wireless signals, biometric locks, and multi-tiered firewalls designed to protect residents' privacy and corporate secrets alike. But as Leela dug deeper, subtle irregularities began to reveal themselves. There were anomalies within the data flow, encrypted packets that didn't fit the expected patterns, firewalls that masked other firewalls, and hidden backdoors slipped in with surgical precision. A flicker caught her eye. The glass walls around her apartment seemed to distort momentarily, like a ripple over a still surface. For a brief instant, the sprawling cityscape outside fractured into shards of static and color, pixels dissolving then snapping back into place. The sensation was disorienting, and a cold prickle of paranoia crawled up Lila's spine. Was it a glitch in the building's digital systems or something else? A deliberate signal, perhaps? She glanced around her apartment, the shadows cast by her screens deepening the room's starkness. Her mind raced with possibilities. If these glitches were not random, then what were they signaling? She returned to the code, eyes scanning for patterns, searching for meaning in the chaos. The encrypted packets pulsed like invisible currents through the network, data hidden within data, shifting forms as if alive. Layla's fingers danced over the keyboard, decrypting fragments, each revealing more unsettling clues. Subtle manipulations of residents' digital footprints, traces of altered histories, and digital erasures that hinted at rewriting reality itself. The implications were chilling. It wasn't just security measures protecting the building anymore. It was an elaborate system of control, invisibly shaping the lives of everyone within these walls. Who was behind it? And why? Her thoughts spiraled, but Leela forced herself back to logic. She was a hacker trained to see through obfuscation, to find the truth buried beneath layers of deception. Yet even she had never encountered such sophisticated concealment. Suddenly, a data trail flickered on her screen. A string of code that should have been there but abruptly vanished, leaving only an empty trace. The silence in her apartment deepened, broken only by the distant hum of city life beyond her window. Layla leaned back, her breath shallow, heart pounding as she contemplated what she had uncovered. This was no ordinary security setup. Beneath the surface, this building hid secrets darker than she had imagined. The night stretched on, and Lila found herself both drawn and repelled by the mystery. The skyscraper, with all its gleaming luxury and digital perfection, had become a cage woven from invisible threads of code and control. Somewhere deep inside its systems lay truths that could destroy lives, including her own. Determined not to be just another passive occupant swallowed by the building's secrets, Lila began to formulate her next move. Every keystroke, every line of decrypted code was a step closer to illumination. But with each discovery, the shadows around her seemed to grow thicker, and the question echoed relentlessly through her mind. What else was lurking in the depths of this digital labyrinth, waiting to be uncovered? As dawn approached, Leela's apartment was bathed in the pale blue glow of her screens, the city outside awakening to a new day, unaware of the silent war waging within its glass heart. She knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere beneath the surface of the skyscraper, the truth waited, and she was determined to find it, no matter the cost. But as the network pulsed and shifted, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that the building was watching her back. The hum of distant elevators and the quiet murmur of a few residents formed a low ambient soundtrack, but her mind was focused entirely on the task ahead. She headed straight for the concierge desk, where a woman of advanced years sat behind a polished counter, her eyes sharp and wary beneath a crown of silver hair. Mildred Hayes glanced up as Layla approached, the corners of her mouth tightening into a guarded smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good afternoon, miss. How can I help you today?" Layla returned the smile, though it was more a mask than a sign of warmth. "I just moved in and I'm still getting familiar with the building. I was wondering if you could help me with some questions about the lower floors." Mildred's gaze flickered slightly, a shadow passing across her face. Lower floors. "We have the usual basement parking and maintenance levels." "Why, do you ask?" There was something in the way she said it, a subtle edge that suggested the question was unwelcome. Leela's instincts sharpened. "I've been noticing some odd things with the building systems, glitches in the security protocols. It makes me curious about what's down there." Mildred's hands folded tightly on the desk. "Buildings this size always have their secrets, dear. But I'm afraid you won't find anyone admitting to anything unusual." Layla leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Is there a reason for that, something you're not allowed to talk about?" The concierge's eyes darted toward the hallway, then back. "I'm just a concierge. I see a lot, but I don't always understand what it means. Sometimes it's safer not to ask too many questions." The warning in her tone was clear. Leela's pulse quickened, but she pressed on. "Have you ever heard noises or seen anything strange coming from the lower levels?" Mildred hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes late at night, there are sounds, machines, voices." The staff hushed it up quickly. "It's all very hush-hush. I'd watch your back if I were you." Before Lila could respond, the concierge straightened, slipping back into her professional demeanor. "I wouldn't want to get you worried over nothing," Lila nodded, masking her unease. As she turned to leave, Mildred called softly, "Be careful, Lila. Not everyone here plays fair." The warning lingered in Lila's mind as she made her way through the sterile corridors. She stopped at a security station where a young guard was monitoring multiple screens. Approaching casually, she asked, "Excuse me, can you tell me about the building's lower floors? I heard there might be restricted areas." The guard's smile was tight, eyes flicking briefly to a silent radio clipped to his shoulder. "Sorry, ma'am, no public access below basement level." "Standard protocol." Layla pressed. "Is there any reason why those areas are off limits? Maintenance, utilities?" "Security reasons," he replied smoothly. "Nothing for residents to worry about." The rehearsed nature of his denial only deepened Layla's suspicions. As she walked away, she caught a glimpse of his hand hovering near the radio, ready to call for backup if needed. Back in her apartment, the city lights twinkled in the dark beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but Layla's gaze was fixed on her laptop screen. Lines of code scrolled rapidly as she sifted through the hack schematics she'd accessed earlier. The building's blueprints were encrypted, but bits and pieces had leaked through, revealing anomalies, unreachable floors, locked-off sections, and corridors that didn't match any official description. Her thoughts spun back to Mildred's cautious words and the guard's practiced denial. It was clear the building was hiding something far beneath the polished surface. Leela's fingers paused over the keyboard, her mind racing. The sub-basement was no longer just a theory. It was a real, dangerous secret, and she was closer than ever to uncovering it. But the questions nagged at her relentlessly. How deep did the conspiracy go? Who else knew? And most importantly, how far would they go to protect it? Outside, the city pulsed obliviously, but inside Lila's apartment, the flickering screen was a gateway to a shadowy world where trust was scarce and danger lurked just 10 floors below. Her resolve hardened. The usual hum of the city below was muffled tonight, swallowed by the silence that had wrapped itself around the luxury skyscraper she now called home. She'd spent the past days piecing together fragments of digital data, tracing faint anomalies within the building's network, and tonight she was closer than ever to something real, something dangerous. Her eyes darted across the screen as lines of code scrolled by, a digital puzzle slowly revealing itself. The encrypted blueprints she'd been chasing flickered, then shifted into a new form architectural diagrams unlike any she'd seen in the building's public records. The usual floor plans ended abruptly at the underground parking level, but here, in the hidden files, 10 additional floors extended downwards, etched in stark detail. Layla's heart thudded in her chest as she absorbed the implications. 10 floors below ground. A secret sub-basement no one admitted existed. She leaned back, exhaling slowly, the weight of her discovery settling over her like a shadow. This wasn't just some obscure maintenance area or forgotten storage space. The sterile, precise layouts hinted at labs, containment chambers, and complex machinery. Her mind raced. What was being hidden down there? And why was the building staff so adamant in denying its very existence? A sudden flicker on one of her screens caught her attention. The network's firewall pulsed with a subtle, almost imperceptible resistance. Someone was watching. Someone was aware of her intrusion. The thrill of the hack was now tangled with raw, creeping paranoia. Earlier that day in the lobby, she'd had a brief encounter with Mildred Hayes, the elderly concierge whose sharp eyes seemed to miss nothing. Mildred had approached her cautiously, voice low and trembling, hinting at things best left unspoken. "They don't want you poking around where you shouldn't," she'd said, glancing nervously at the security cameras blinking from every corner. Layla had nodded, a faint smile masking the unease creeping beneath her skin. Mildred's subtle warnings only confirmed that the building itself was a fortress one, not just of steel and glass, but of secrets and surveillance. Back in her apartment, the smart systems she'd once trusted now betrayed her. Lights flickered with no cause, the temperature oscillated erratically, and soft, intermittent beeps from her security software hinted at breaches she couldn't trace. It was as if the building was alive and watching, adapting to her every move. She rubbed her temples, the fragments of memories, some real, some possibly implanted, whirling in her mind. Had she already been touched by whatever experiments were conducted below? The question gnawed at her, sharpening her resolve even as it deepened her isolation. Her gaze drifted to the panoramic window overlooking the city. The skyline glittered with indifferent beauty, neon lights and distant sirens painting a cold, cyberpunk tableau. Yet the skyscraper she inhabited gleamed like a monolith of glass and steel, an immaculate facade concealing its darkest depths. Tonight, Layla promised herself she would prepare. The discovery of the invisible floors was the breakthrough she needed, but it was only the beginning. She had to find a way down into the bowels of the building and into the heart of the conspiracy. Her fingers danced across the keyboard once more, tapping into hidden networks, tracing access points, and hunting for the elevator shafts or service passages that would lead her 10 floors below ground. Every keystroke was a defiant challenge thrown at the unseen watchers. Suddenly, a message blinked on her screen, an anonymous warning: "Stop digging. You don't know what you're getting into." Her lips curled into a wry smile. That was exactly why she had to keep going. As the night deepened, the skyscraper's secrets loomed larger, and Layla's determination burned brighter. The invisible floors were no longer just lines on a blueprint, they were a doorway into a shadow world where memories were manipulated, identities rewritten, and freedom stripped away. And Layla Morgan was ready to descend. But as the digital clock ticked past midnight, the first sounds of approaching footsteps echoed faintly outside her door, and the cold certainty settled in her bones. She was no longer alone. The descent into darkness had begun, and the skyscraper was watching her every move. The luxury skyscraper around her was a silent giant, glass walls reflecting the neon city lights outside, but inside something felt disturbingly wrong. The digital glitches that had first caught her attention were escalating. Subtle at first, a flicker in the smart lighting system, a momentary blackout of her apartment's security cameras, but now they took on a sinister rhythm. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, eyes scanning lines of encrypted data pouring in from the building's network. She could feel the digital tendrils of the skyscraper's infrastructure wrapping tighter around her. Her hacking tools pinged with warnings, firewalls adapting, countermeasures activating. Then, unexpectedly, a ghostly message blinked on her primary monitor. "Stop." It flashed for a split second before vanishing, leaving her with a sinking feeling deep in her gut. "Who's watching me?" she whispered to the empty room, the echo of her own voice bouncing off the cold walls. Her heart raced as she tried to trace the message's origin, but the system was labyrinthine, cloaked in layers of obfuscation that suggested a highly sophisticated security apparatus. This wasn't just corporate protection, it was a trap. As she leaned back, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. The building's security cameras, she knew their locations well, seemed almost alive. Their red recording lights flickered like ominous eyes tracking her every move. The sensation was suffocating. Every step she took in her own apartment felt monitored, every breath measured. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Ethan. "Be careful. I'm picking up increased security sweeps near your location. Don't push too hard tonight." Layla typed back quickly, no choice. Need to know what's really going on beneath this building. The fragmented memories that haunted her mind clawed their way to the surface, blurring the line between past and present. Faces and places flickered like corrupted files, some painfully familiar, others alien and distorted. Were these her memories? Or had someone rewritten them? She moved to the window and stared out at the city skyline, her reflection fractured across the cracked pane. The glass distorted her face into shards, mirroring the broken pieces of her identity. She swallowed hard, shaking off the creeping despair. She was no stranger to fights for control over data, over truth, over herself, but this was different. The enemy was inside her own mind. Suddenly, the apartment's lights stuttered, plunging her into near darkness before strobing erratically like a malfunctioning heartbeat. Shadows leapt across the walls in erratic bursts, the atmosphere thick with unseen menace. Her breath caught in her throat as the digital world she trusted turned hostile. Her hands trembled as she reached for her encrypted comms device. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm not sure what's real anymore. The system's messing with me." From the other end came a steadying voice. "You're not alone, Lila. We'll break through this. Just hold on." But even as she clung to his words, a cold certainty settled in her bones. The watchers in the walls were closing in, and every secret she unearthed only tightened their grip. Somewhere deep beneath the surface, 10 floors down, the real battle was waiting. And Lila knew the next steps could cost her everything, even her own mind. She squared her shoulders, the defiant spark in her eyes undimmed. Whatever the cost, she would fight. The watchers may be in the walls, but she was no ghost to be silenced. As the night deepened, so did the shadows. Surrounded by a fortress of screens and tangled cables, she sat hunched over her laptop, the rhythmic tapping of keys punctuating the silence. Tonight, the glitches and cryptic warnings that had plagued her apartment felt heavier, more urgent. She needed help, and there was only one person she could call. The door creaked open, and Ethan Shaw stepped inside, shaking off the rain from his jacket. His tall frame filled the cramped space, a rugged charm softened by the tired lines on his face. "You still running from ghosts, Lila?" he asked with a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She looked up, her sharp gaze meeting his steady one. "Only the ones worth chasing." Ethan's presence was a paradox, a reminder of battles fought and lost, yet a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. They hadn't spoken in months, their last parting bitter and unresolved. But the stakes had changed. The skyscraper's secrets demanded an alliance. He moved to the cluttered table, pulling out a battered backpack. From it, he produced a stack of printed schematics, their edges curling from frequent handling. "I managed to get these from an old contact," he said, spreading them out. "The building's official plans don't include the sub-basement, but these blueprints show 10 floors below ground, exactly where you think those mind experiments are happening." Layla leaned in, her fingers tracing the hidden levels. The sterile lines and symbols masked the horrors beneath: chambers for memory erasure, digital nodes for psychological control. "How deep does this rabbit hole go?" she whispered. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Deep enough to bury anyone who gets too curious." Together, they began piecing together the puzzle: security protocols that adapted in real time, encrypted networks that shifted like shadows, and surveillance sweeping every corner. Ethan shared insider knowledge of corporate tactics, how they silenced whistleblowers, erased inconvenient memories, and manipulated digital footprints. Outside, rain tapped a steady rhythm against the window panes, the city's distant hum a faint reminder of normal life. Inside, whispers of conspiracy filled the room, a fragile cocoon of trust amidst pervasive paranoia. "You're playing a dangerous game," Ethan warned, voice low. "They're watching. They'll come for you?" Layla nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. But retreat was no longer an option. Their conversation stretched into the night, strategies unfolding, cyberattacks, infiltration points, contingencies for worst-case scenarios. The encrypted drive Ethan handed her was more than just data. It was a lifeline, a weapon, and a symbol of fragile trust. As dawn threatened the horizon, Lila felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared in months: hope. Yet beneath it lurked a cold certainty that the battle for truth was just beginning, and the enemy was closing in. The skyscraper loomed outside, silent and indifferent, its glass walls reflecting a city oblivious to the war waging 10 floors below. Leela sat back, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The next move was hers, but this time she wasn't alone. A sudden, sharp beep from her monitor broke the silence. An unauthorized access alert. Someone was inside her digital domain. The game had begun, her eyes narrowed. Bring it on. And with that, Lila plunged headfirst into the shadows of the skyscraper's dark heart, where trust was scarce and every secret could be a death sentence. The alliance with Ethan was a gamble, but one she was willing to take. Because to fight monsters, sometimes you had to become one, or at least find those who already had scars to prove it. Outside, the city's neon lights flickered like distant warnings. Inside, the battle for minds and memories was about to escalate beyond anything Lila had imagined. And she would face it, no matter the cost. The hum of distant traffic was muffled, almost as if the world itself had quieted to listen. In front of her, a holographic photo hovered, a moment from her childhood, a sunlit afternoon with her mother and a small dog she barely remembered. The image flickered, twisted, and for a heartbeat, the faces blurred into something unrecognizable. She blinked rapidly, heart pounding. Was it a glitch in her system? Or something far worse? Her hands trembled as she reached for the photo, trying to steady the wavering image, but the distortion deepened. The edges of the memory frayed, colors bleeding into one another until the scene collapsed entirely, leaving only a black void. Layla swallowed hard, the cold realization settling in her chest. What if these fragments weren't just glitches? What if her memories had been tampered with? She leaned back, the chair creaking under her slight weight, and closed her eyes. The past few weeks had been a relentless barrage of digital puzzles and shadowy encounters. Every discovery led to more questions, and every question deepened the abyss of uncertainty she was falling into. Her fragmented memories weren't just inconvenient, they were dangerous. They blurred the lines between who she was and who someone else wanted her to be. A sudden flicker in the apartment's lighting jolted her back to the present. The power dipped briefly, then plummeted into total darkness. The hum of electronics died, leaving only the soft whistle of the wind brushing against the building's glass skin. Panic prickled at her senses. She fumbled for her laptop, the only source of reliable light and connection to the outside world. When she hit the power button, the screen sprang to life, its cold blue glow a fragile anchor in the blackness. Lines of code scrolled rapidly across the display fragments of data logs she had intercepted during her earlier hacks. They were incomplete, scrambled, and most troublingly, heavily redacted. Among the encrypted layers, she spotted references to behavioral modifications, memory protocols, and something labeled Subject L7. Her breath hitched. Could that be her? Was she one of the test subjects? The apartment felt suddenly claustrophobic. The walls, once transparent and open, now seemed to close in, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. She rose and paced, the soft tap of her footsteps echoing faintly. In the corner of her eye, the cracked mirror on the wall caught her attention. She stared at her reflection-sharp features, dark eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but then something shifted. For a brief second, her face blurred and morphed into that of a stranger. A woman she didn't recognize. The image snapped back before she could process it, leaving her breathless and dizzy. Am I losing my mind? She whispered, voice trembling. No answer came, only the hollow silence. She returned to the mirror, eyes searching for any sign of deception. But the room remained still, the faint scent of cold metal and recycled air filling her lungs. The skyscraper was alive with secrets, its steel and glass veins pulsing with hidden machinery and surveillance. She was caught in its grip, a lone hacker fighting a battle on multiple fronts against external enemies and the ghosts within her own mind. Suddenly, a faint murmur drifted through the walls, whispers just beyond comprehension. She pressed her ear to the cold surface, heart racing. The voices were urgent, fragmented, echoing through the vents and conduit snatches of code, pleas, warnings. Layla's skin prickled with paranoia. Was it the building's security systems? Or something else? Someone trying to reach her through the static. She pulled back, her breath shallow. The apartment felt empty, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed down. She wrapped her arms around herself, the chill of isolation sinking in. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford, not in the skyscraper, not in her own mind. Hours passed in restless pacing and frantic note-taking. Lila scoured every file, every encrypted message, piecing together a mosaic of manipulation and control. Her memories, once a refuge, now felt like a trapdoor beneath her feet. The experiments were not confined to others, they had reached into her past, rewriting the script of her life. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a relentless determination. If her mind was a battlefield, she would fight tooth and nail to reclaim it. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As dawn's pale light seeped through the windows, Lila stared out over the city's glittering sprawl, a lone figure against the sprawling glass tower. 10 floors below, the secrets festered, waiting, and she was ready to descend. But first, she needed to face the fragments and fears that threatened to consume her. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Ethan, "We need to talk." Now, Lila swallowed the lump in her throat and typed back, "I'm coming." The fight was only beginning. Lila Morgan sat rigidly on the edge of a metal crate, fingers flying across the keyboard in a blur of practiced precision. Beside her, Ethan Shaw maintained a watchful eye on the door, his posture tense but controlled, muscles coiled like a predator ready to spring. The air smelled faintly of ozone and stale recycled air, mingling with the faint hum of dozens of servers working overtime to keep the building's digital heart beating. "Almost there," Ethan whispered, voice low but steady. "Just a few more layers to bypass. These guys don't want anyone poking around their files." Lila nodded, her sharp gaze fixated on the lines of code scrolling rapidly across her screen. The encrypted data packets they intercepted earlier had proven only the tip of the iceberg. Now, peeling back firewall after firewall, they were closing in on something far more sinister than either had anticipated. "Look at this," Layla murmured, dragging a file open. The screen filled with detailed document psychological profiles, behavioral conditioning schedules, and what appeared to be logs of memory alterations performed on residents. They've been running experiments on people living here. Mind manipulation, memory erasure, emotional conditioning. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not just unethical, it's criminal. They worked in near silence, the only sounds the rhythmic tapping of keys and the occasional beep from the system. Every new file they uncovered added another layer of darkness to the building's hidden story. The residents, many of whom thought themselves merely lucky tenants of a luxury skyscraper, were unwitting subjects in a grand experiment orchestrated from the shadows. Lila's mind raced. Memories flickered at the edges, fragments of lost time, sudden lapses she'd chalked up to stress. Could she have been one of those subjects? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, mingling with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We need to download everything," Ethan said, breaking her reverie. "The more evidence we have, the better chance we've got of exposing this." "Agreed," Lila replied, fingers flying. But just as the transfer began, an alarm beeped sharply from the corner of the room, an intrusion detection system activating. "Shit," Ethan hissed. "We've been spotted. They're onto us." Layla's heart pounded as she initiated a countermeasure, launching a cascade of digital smokescreens designed to confuse the security protocols. Outside the server walls, footsteps echoed, growing closer, the heavy thud of boots signaling that their time was running out. Almost done, she breathed, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just hold them off a little longer." Ethan moved swiftly, pulling a small device from his pocket and jamming it into a nearby terminal. Sparks flew briefly as the power flickered, the room bathed in erratic light. The alarm ceased. "Got it," Ethan said, a grim smile crossing his face. "Back door's open, let's move." Clutching the stolen data, they slipped out of the server room, shadows swallowing them as they darted through narrow hallways. Each step was a gamble, each breath a battle against the building's unseen eyes. But now, armed with truths hidden behind closed doors, they had a weapon more powerful than any code knowledge. The revelations in those files shifted the ground beneath Lila's feet. The skyscraper was not just a home. It was a cage, a laboratory, a battleground for control over human minds. And she was right in the heart of it. Outside, the city lights flickered, indifferent to the war unfolding in the depths below. But inside Lila, a fierce determination ignited, burning away the fear. They had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The night was far from over, and the real fight was just beginning. Above her, the towering glass skyscraper shimmered in the fading twilight. A beacon of luxury and power, but to Layla it was a cage. Her fingers tapped nervously against the strap of her backpack as she checked her watch for the third time in as many minutes. Somewhere in the shadows of this building, a secret was buried, and tonight she was supposed to dig deeper. She had arranged to meet someone who could provide a window into the darkest corners of the skyscraper's hidden truths. Dr. Naomi Chun, the name had surfaced through encrypted communications, whispered warnings from unknown allies, and a chance encounter with a jittery building staffer who had slipped a note into her mailbox. Naomi was said to be a scientist who had grown disillusioned with the experiments she was forced to participate in, someone who wanted out, and more importantly, someone willing to help. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the far end of the garage. Layla's heart quickened as a figure emerged from the shadows, a slender woman in a crisp lab coat, her delicate features framed by strands of dark hair that fell nervously across her face. Naomi's eyes flicked around the empty space, alert but resigned. "You're Leela," Naomi asked softly, her voice barely carrying over the distant hum of the city. "That's me," Lila replied, stepping forward cautiously. "You said you have information." Naomi nodded, producing a small encrypted drive from inside her coat. "I can't talk here. Follow me." They moved quickly, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the cavernous silence of the parking garage. Naomi led her through a service door into a narrow corridor, sterile walls illuminated by harsh fluorescent light. The scent of antiseptic hung in the air, mingling with a faint metallic tang. In a small, sparsely furnished office tucked away behind a locked door, Naomi finally let down her guard. She placed the encrypted drive on the desk and pulled up a series of digital files on the monitor. Charts, graphs, and patient logs flickered across the screen, revealing a grim tableau of clinical experiments. "This is the real work going on 10 floors below," Naomi whispered, her fingers trembling as she navigated between files. "They're erasing memories, rewriting identities. This isn't just surveillance or corporate spying. It's mind control on residents, employees, anyone they choose." Layla's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the data. There were images of devices, sleek, invasive machines designed to interface directly with the brain, records of brain scans before and after procedures, and logs detailing emotional conditioning protocols. Some entries listed residents by number, others by name, though many identities were redacted or altered. "Why are you helping me?" Layla asked, suspicion sharpening her tone. Naomi hesitated, then said, "Because I can't be part of this anymore. I joined for the science, for the potential to help people, but this is monstrous. And if you don't stop them, no one will." A sudden beep from Naomi's CUM device cut through the quiet, and her eyes darted to the screen. "They're onto me," she said urgently. "You have to be careful now. They won't hesitate to erase you, or worse." Layla packed the drive quickly, her mind racing. This was bigger than she imagined. The corporation wasn't just monitoring, they were puppeteering minds, erasing memories to cover their tracks and control dissent. "You can trust me," Lila said firmly. "We'll get this out." Naomi gave a shaky nod before slipping out, leaving Lila alone in the cold office. The weight of the secret pressed down, but beneath the fear was a flicker of hope. She had allies now, but the cost of trust in this place was high, and the shadows were closing in. Layla stepped back into the corridor, her resolve hardening. The skyscraper's glass walls gleamed above, but the truth was buried deep, and she was ready to descend into the darkness to uncover it. The fight had just begun. The night stretched on as Leela pored over the files Naomi had given her, cross-referencing data, piecing together the fragmented evidence. Every revelation pulled her deeper into a web of deceit and cruelty. She could almost hear the whispered echoes of those who had suffered within the building's hidden sub-basement, their memories stolen and rewritten. Her own fragmented recollections flickered at the edge of her mind, a chilling reminder that she might already be one of the victims. But now, armed with Naomi's secret and a renewed sense of purpose, Layla was determined to expose the truth and fight the monstrous machinery that sought to control them all. Outside, the city's neon glow flickered against the night sky, but inside the skyscraper, 10 floors below ground, darkness reigned. And Leela Morgan was ready to face it head-on. The meeting with Naomi marked a turning point. As Leela moved through the skyscraper's corridors in the days that followed, each step was shadowed by the knowledge that eyes watched her every move. Security protocols tightened, and paranoia gnawed at her sanity. Yet, with each new piece of information, her determination grew. Naomi's warnings echoed in her mind. Trust was a fragile, precious thing here. But without it, no truth could be brought to light. Lila glanced back once more at the encrypted drive, its silent promise burning in her pocket. The secret of the skyscraper was no longer hers alone. It was a burden shared and a weapon against the darkness below. The fight was far from over, and the real descent was only just beginning. Lila Morgan crouched beside a terminal, her fingers dancing rapidly over the keyboard, the glow from the monitors casting sharp shadows on her focused face. Ethan Shaw was at her side, eyes darting to the door even as he assisted in bypassing the latest digital firewall. Their breaths were shallow, synchronized in the silent rhythm of urgency. "Almost there," Ethan whispered, voice tight. "Just need a few more seconds to decrypt this segment." Lila nodded, sweat beading at her temple despite the chill of the room. The encrypted files they sought to extract held the proof of the corporation's darkest, secret mind manipulation experiments conducted beneath the very ground they stood on. Every second felt like a gamble, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting to catch them in the act. Suddenly, the room erupted in a shrill alarm. Red lights bathed the space in a harsh, unyielding glow. The monitors flashed warnings and security protocols initiated automatically. Layla's heart lurched. "They know, Ethan. We triggered something." Ethan cursed it under his breath, fingers flying faster over the keyboard. "Hold on, I'm trying to stall the system." Outside the server room, footsteps pounded against the polished floors, heavy and purposeful. Javier Cruz, the security chief, moved with lethal precision. His presence was a cold shadow stalking the corridors, his every step echoing the threat he posed. He checked his tactical display, eyes narrowing as the location of the breach blinked insistently. "They're inside the server room," he muttered, voice low but filled with authority. "I want them caught. No mistakes." Inside, Lila's mind raced. The alarms were more than just warnings, they were a declaration of war. "We have to move," she hissed to Ethan, pulling a USB drive from the terminal. "If they catch us here, it's over." Ethan nodded, snapping his laptop shut. "Follow me." They slipped out of the server room into the labyrinthine halls of the skyscraper's lower levels. The air was thick with an antiseptic chill that contrasted sharply with the pounding heat of their fear. Lights flickered overhead, their hum a steady reminder of the omnipresent surveillance. "Which way?" Lila whispered, scanning the corridor. "Back toward the staff elevators," Ethan replied. "Least monitored, but we'll have to be quick." They moved like shadows, pressed close to the walls. Every sound amplified in Lila's ears, their own footsteps, the distant shouts of security, the mechanical whir of cameras panning. A sudden noise to their left made Lila freeze. A door creaked open and a security guard rounded the corner. With barely a moment's thought, Ethan grabbed Lila's arm and pulled her into a narrow alcove. They pressed their bodies flat against the cool metal wall, holding their breath as the guard's steps thundered past. "Too close," Lila murmured, heart racing. They continued, weaving through corridors until they reached a stairwell leading upward. But the sound of heavy boots behind them was closing fast. Javier Cruz's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and commanding. "They're on the move. Don't let them escape." Lila's mind spun. The data they'd stolen was precious proof enough to topple a corporate empire, but the price of capture was unthinkable. She glanced at Ethan, who gave a grim nod. "We split up," he said. "I'll create a diversion. You get the data out." "No," Lila said, shaking her head. "We do this together." But before they could argue, footsteps converged ahead. Javier appeared, blocking their path, his eyes cold and unyielding, going somewhere. Lila's breath caught. The corridor was too narrow to fight effectively. Thinking fast, she kicked a loose panel on the wall, sending sparks flying and plunging the hall into darkness. The alarm screamed louder, the building's chaos swallowing their movements. "Now!" Lila shouted, grabbing Ethan's hand. They sprinted through the emergency exit, the stale air outside a sudden shock to their senses. Behind them, Javier's frustrated curse echoed. The chase was far from over, but for now, they had escaped. Panting, Lila leaned against the cold brick of a service alley, eyes darting to the data drive clenched in her fist. Her mind churned with paranoia had they been seen. Was the data intact? Could she trust anyone anymore? Ethan exhaled sharply. "We crossed a line," he said. "No turning back now." Layla swallowed her fear. The skyscraper's secrets were unraveling, and with each step, the walls closed in tighter. But she was determined. The room was dim, bathed in the cold blue glow of her laptop screen, its light flickering across the scattered papers and cracked photographs on the desk before her. She picked up one photo, worn and blurred, the edges frayed like the edges of her own recollections. It was a picture of herself, but something about the image felt off, as if it belonged to someone else, or a version of her that she could no longer fully grasp. Her fingers trembled as she traced the outline of her face, trying to summon the memory tied to that moment. But the past was a fractured mirror, reflecting shards that refused to form a coherent whole. Faces, places, feelings all flickered in and out of focus like static on a broken transmission. She swallowed hard, a lump rising in her throat as she forced herself to sit back and breathe. The apartment was silent except for the soft whir of her computer's cooling fans. Outside, the city's pulse carried on, indifferent to her inner turmoil. She closed her eyes, willing herself to remember. Then, without warning, a sudden flash seared through her mind, a sterile room bathed in harsh white light, cold metal surfaces gleaming under fluorescent bulbs, the faint scent of antiseptic. The sound of distant footsteps echoing down endless corridors. Panic surged as she realized she was trapped, restrained, struggling against invisible bonds. The memory shattered before she could grasp it fully, leaving her gasping for breath, heart pounding. Layla opened her eyes, sweat beading on her forehead. The lines between reality and illusion blurred, and a creeping dread settled deep in her gut. Was this a memory or a manufactured nightmare? Had she been a subject in the experiments she was trying to expose? The thought clawed at her, relentless and terrifying. Determined not to succumb to despair, Layla turned back to her laptop. She opened encrypted files and logs she had painstakingly gathered, scanning through lines of code and fragmented data. Her eyes ached from hours of strain, but she pressed on, searching for any clue that could anchor her scattered thoughts. Each discovery was a double-edged sword, evidence of the corporation's reach, hints of manipulation, and disturbing implications about her own past. Despite the growing paranoia gnawing at her mind, Layla's resolve hardened. She would unravel the truth, no matter the cost. But the deeper she delved, the more isolated she felt. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford, not in the digital shadows where allies might be enemies and memories could be weaponized. In a rare moment of quiet, she whispered into the stillness of her apartment, "Who am I, really?" The question echoed unanswered, swallowed by the cold walls. Alone with her fractured memories and mounting fears, Layla knew the battle was no longer just against external forces, it was a war for her very identity. And as the night deepened, the skyscraper around her seemed less like a home and more like a prison, its hidden secrets closing in 10 floors below. The journey to the truth had only just begun, but already the shadows of memory threatened to consume her. A sudden chime from her laptop broke the silence, an encrypted message blinking on the screen. Layla's breath caught. Was it a warning, a clue, or a trap? She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Whatever lay behind that message, she knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back now. Despite the late hour, the air felt charged with urgency. Layla sat hunched forward, eyes fixed on cascades of encrypted code scrolling across her main screen. Beside her, Ethan Shaw leaned in, his tall frame silhouetted against the bluish light, fingers poised and ready to assist. Dr. Naomi Chun, her delicate face tense with both resolve and anxiety, watched over their shoulders, ready to provide the scientific context only she could offer. There, Ethan breathed, a sharp intake of breath breaking the silence. This segment, these packets. They're not just internal corporate communications. They're encoded messages to government operatives. Layla's eyes sharpened, her mind racing as she cross-referenced the data. Can you isolate the source? Naomi pointed at a series of encrypted signatures layered beneath the main transmissions. And these rival corporate entities? They're jockeying for position, trying to get their hands on Vel's technology. This isn't just a corporate project anymore. It's an arms race. The implications settled over them like a thick fog. A secret sub-basement conducting mind experiments was sinister enough, but the tentacles reaching into government agencies and corporate rivals elevated the stakes beyond personal survival. This was a battle for control of human consciousness itself. Layla's fingers danced over the keyboard, breaking through yet another encryption layer. The room seemed to pulse with the tension of their discovery. "We're not just fighting a corporation," she said quietly. "We're up against a network that could rewrite reality for millions." Ethan rubbed the stubble on his chin, his usual easy charm replaced by a grim seriousness. "And that network knows we're here? I just picked up a trace. Someone's probing our systems. They're closing in." Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "I never wanted to be part of this. When I joined the research division, I thought I was helping advance medicine, not weaponizing minds." Layla looked at her, the flicker of vulnerability in Naomi's eyes momentarily softening her own guarded expression. "We'll get through this," she said. "But we need to be smarter, faster, and more careful. Trust is a luxury we can't afford, but it's also the only way we survive." The trio fell into a tense silence, each absorbed in the gravity of their situation. Outside, the city lights shimmered obliviously, unaware of the digital war waging within the glass walls of the skyscraper. Hours stretched as they peeled back layers of encrypted files, revealing contracts, covert operations, and chilling plans to expand the mind control experiments beyond the building's walls. The data hinted at a shadowy alliance between powerful stakeholders, each hungry to harness the technology for their own ends. Suddenly, a warning blared from Ethan's system, an intrusion attempt detected. "They're here," he said, voice low but urgent. "We've got to move." Lila's mind raced to formulate a plan. Their mission was no longer just about exposing the experiments. It was about outmaneuvering an enemy that reached into every corridor of power. Every keystroke, every decision became a gamble, but the truth was worth the risk. As they scrambled to secure their data and prepare for the next phase, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper they delved, the more dangerous the game became. The encrypted truths they uncovered were only the beginning of a perilous descent into a labyrinth of conspiracy, betrayal, and mind control. "And somewhere in the shadows, Doctor." Marcus Vell and his allies watched, waiting for the moment to strike back. The fight for autonomy over memory and identity was only just beginning. The cyber-lit room buzzed with a tension that was almost tangible. Layla's eyes, sharp and unblinking, scanned the decrypted files that painted a disturbing picture, a nexus of corporate greed, government complicity, and the ruthless pursuit of power. "This isn't just science," Naomi whispered, voice trembling. "It's control. Complete control," Ethan nodded grimly. "And it's bigger than we thought. Rival companies are circling like vultures. If this technology falls into the wrong hands—" "We can't let that happen," Lila interrupted, voice steely. "We have to expose everything." But as she spoke, the soft ping of an alert pulled their attention back to the screen. An unknown hacker was probing their defenses, testing their firewall like a predator-smelling weakness. Leela's heart pounded. The digital battlefield was expanding, and the enemies were closing in. Yet, in the depths of her paranoia, a flicker of determination burned brighter than ever. "We're not alone in this," she said, voice low but resolute, "and we won't back down." The encrypted truths had been uncovered. Now the real fight to reclaim identity and freedom began. Naomi Chin sat motionless in the sterile twilight of her laboratory. The relentless hum of cooling fans and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead weaving themselves into a backdrop of uneasy solitude. Her fingers hovered just above the keyboard, trembling slightly, as she stared at the encrypted file cascading across her monitor. Each line of code represented a piece of the horrific puzzle she had been forced to confront for months, evidence of the mind manipulation. Experiments surreptitiously conducted beneath the luxury skyscraper she worked in. She had joined the corporation initially with hope, eager to advance scientific knowledge, but the creeping realization of what her research was being weaponized for now gnawed at her conscience. The room was cold, sterile, even by laboratory standards, yet Naomi felt a deeper chill settle in her chest. A photograph taped inside a locked drawer caught her gaze. A small girl with bright eyes and an innocent smile, a fragment of her own family life before the corporate world had consumed her. The image was a daily reminder of what was truly at stake. She swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility pressing down like an anchor, threatening to drag her under. Could she continue to stay silent, to do nothing? The answer was clear, yet terrifying. That night, after the last of her colleagues had filtered out and the building had almost emptied, Naomi slipped through the shadowed corridors, clutching a small encrypted drive close to her chest. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and the faint metallic tang of the ventilation system. She navigated the labyrinthine underground parking garage, heart pounding in sharp rhythm with the echoing steps of distant security patrols. In a dimly lit corner, almost swallowed by the darkness, Lila Morgan waited, lean and alert, her piercing gaze flickering with cautious anticipation. "You shouldn't be here," Naomi whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of the building. Layla's lips curled into a tight smile. "Neither should you. But we don't have the luxury of waiting." Hands trembling, Naomi handed over the drive. "This contains everything I could extract without raising alarms, data on the experiments, subject files, even internal communications. It's not much, but it's a start." "It's everything," Lila said, her voice thick with gratitude and steely resolve. The two women exchanged a fleeting look, an unspoken pact binding them together against the mounting darkness. Naomi's mind reeled with the consequences of her choice. If discovered, she would be branded a traitor, her career obliterated, her safety compromised. Yet the alternative, complicity in the erasure of countless lives, was unthinkable. Days passed like a fevered blur. Naomi returned to her duties, maintaining the delicate facade of compliance while secretly siphoning information to Lila. Each clandestine transfer chipped away at her nerves, the double life exacting a brutal toll. She found herself retreating from colleagues, avoiding casual conversations that might unravel her carefully constructed disguise. One afternoon, a sudden knock on her office door sent a jolt through her bloodstream. Security Chief Javier Cruz's shadow loomed in the doorway, his cold gaze piercing. "Dr. Chun, a word," he said, voice low and authoritative. Naomi's throat tightened, but she forced a calm smile. "Of course." In the sterile interrogation room, under the unforgiving glare of overhead lights, Javier questioned her about recent access logs and data transfers. Naomi's mind raced for a plausible explanation, weaving a web of half-truths and technical jargon. Her heart hammered as she sensed the thin line she walked between exposure and survival. After what felt like an eternity, Javier dismissed her with a warning glance. "Be careful where your curiosity leads, Doctor." Back in her sanctuary, Naomi exhaled shakily, the close call a stark reminder of the stakes. Yet beneath the fear, a fierce determination kindled. She was no longer just a scientist. She was a guardian of truth, a beacon for those blinded by the corporation's shadows. Late one evening, as rain streaked the skyscraper's glass facade, Naomi sat alone in the lab, decrypting a fresh cache of files Layla had extracted. The data unveiled chilling details, protocols for memory erasure, emotional conditioning algorithms, and disturbing reports of psychological collapse among test subjects. Each revelation deepened the chasm of guilt and outrage within her. But amidst the darkness, Naomi found resolve. She would continue to aid Lila, to fight in whatever way she could. The road ahead was fraught with peril, but the cost of silence was far greater. As dawn broke, painting the city in hues of cold blue and gray, Naomi sent her latest encrypted message to Layla, a lifeline thrown across the void, a small but vital piece of the puzzle. Somewhere deep inside, she dared to hope that together, they might unravel the nightmare 10 floors below and reclaim the humanity that technology sought to erase. But tonight, that sanctuary betrayed her. The air felt thick and oppressive. Even the faintest light from her desk lamp seemed to flicker uncertainly, casting long shadows that danced in rhythm with her faltering heartbeat. She sat slumped in her chair, fingers trembling as she stared blankly at the screen before her. The code scrolling endlessly was no longer a familiar ally, but a torrent of indecipherable symbols, fragments of data she could no longer grasp. Her mind flickered, a sudden void where seconds vanished like smoke, memories dissolving into nothingness. A chill crept up her spine as an oppressive wave of dread flooded her chest. The fragmented images that surfaced, flashes of places she couldn't place, faces distorted and blurred, disoriented her. Was it real? Or had the corporation's shadowy experiments already reached into her mind's deepest vaults? Her breath hitched. The room tilted. Panic tightened its grip. Suddenly, the door burst open, breaking the suffocating silence. Ethan Shaw strode in, urgency etched across his rugged features. His usual easy smile was replaced by a grim determination as he quickly set a secure laptop on the cluttered table. "Layla," he said, voice low but steady, "you're not alone in this. They're trying to get inside your head, but we've got tools." She looked up, eyes glassy, searching his face for some anchor. Trust felt like a fragile thread stretched taut between them, but she grasped it desperately. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. Ethan nodded, pulling her away from the screen. "We'll fight this, together." Later that night, Naomi Shun arrived, her presence as quiet and tentative as a shadow slipping through the door. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to her coat, and her delicate hands trembled slightly as she produced a small vial filled with translucent liquid. "This might help," Naomi said softly, adjusting her glasses nervously. "It's experimental, but it could stabilize your cognitive functions, slow down whatever they're doing to your memories." Lila studied the vial, then the earnest face of the scientist who risked everything to aid her. "I don't have a choice," she murmured, swallowing hard. With a steadying breath, Naomi administered the medication. Layla felt a slow, creeping calm begin to settle beneath the storm raging in her mind. Days blurred as the psychological warfare escalated. Digital assaults on her neural pathways, subliminal messages infiltrating her dreams, emotional tides rising and crashing without warning. Each blackout shredded fragments of her past, each manipulated feeling a betrayal from within. Yet, with Ethan's technical expertise and Naomi's medical insight, Lila fought back. Together, they orchestrated countermeasures, firewalls for her mind, digital shields woven through code and psychological resilience. One night, the trio huddled around a monitor, cascading lines of code reflecting in Lila's piercing eyes. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, trembling but determined as she struggled to reclaim control. "We're close," Ethan whispered, voice taut with hope and fear. "Hold on," Lila breathed, every muscle tense, every thought a battle. In the face of overwhelming odds, she refused to surrender. The corporation might assault her mind, but her will flickered like a stubborn flame, fragile yet unextinguished. As the chapter closed, shadows lengthened beyond the walls of her apartment. The fight was far from over. But Leela Morgan stood unbroken, ready to push deeper into the abyss of secrets beneath the skyscraper, to confront the pressure points where power sought to fracture her very self. And in that defiant stance, hope took root. Lila Morgan stood near the concierge desk, her sharp eyes fixed on the elderly woman behind it. Mildred Hayes, the concierge, was a fixture of the building, an unassuming presence who had witnessed its every change for decades. Tonight, though, there was something different in the way Mildred glanced around, a flicker of unease that betrayed her usual composed demeanor. Layla approached cautiously, aware that every conversation here could be overheard or recorded. Yet she needed answers, and Mildred was the only person who seemed to harbor a silent knowledge about the building's oddities. Leaning slightly closer, Lila lowered her voice to a near whisper. "Mildred, I know you see things. I know you hear things. There's more to this building than anyone admits." The older woman's eyes narrowed, scanning the quiet lobby as if weighing the danger of speaking aloud. After a moment, she nodded subtly, reaching beneath the counter to retrieve a small, folded piece of paper. With a trembling hand, she slid it across to Lila. "Not here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Safe place. Hidden doors. Watch the elevators. Some don't go where they say." Lila's fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. It was a crudely drawn schematic of the lower floors, with cryptic annotations marking what looked like hidden access points, maintenance shafts. emergency exits, and even what appeared to be a secret elevator shaft. This was the break she had been waiting for. "Why help me?" Layla asked, her voice soft but urgent. Mildred hesitated, then sighed, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of secrets. "Because they're wrong to keep us in the dark. And because I've seen what happens to those who ask too many questions." A sudden chime from the elevator echoed through the lobby, breaking the tension. Mildred glanced toward the doors and straightened, her expression tightening. "Be careful, Lila, they're watching." Back in her apartment, the faint hum of the city below was muted by the thick glass walls. Layla sat hunched over her laptop, the blue light illuminating her focused face as she studied the schematics. Each line drawn by Mildred opened a new pathway in her mind, a way deeper into the building's secrets, a step closer to the hidden sub-basement, but the knowledge came with a price. Every keystroke sent ripples through the building's digital defenses, triggering silent alarms she could not yet see. The footsteps in the hallways grew more frequent, and the digital glitches she had noticed earlier became more aggressive, as if the building itself was tightening its grip. Layla's breath hitched as she heard the faint click of the elevator doors again. The game was changing. The stakes were higher. But armed with Mildred's clues, she was ready to descend, to uncover the truth buried 10 floors below. The night stretched on, filled with whispered plans and the cold glow of screens. Somewhere in the shadows, the skyscraper waited, waiting to see if the hacker who dared to challenge its secrets would survive the fall. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The next move would be the riskiest yet, and there was no turning back now. "All right," Lila whispered to herself, "let's find out what's really down there." The elevator chimed once more, punctuating the silence like a heartbeat, and with it, the descent into the unknown began. Ethan leaned back in the chair opposite her, his arms crossed, watching her with careful patience. The air was thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. "You never really told me much about why you're so careful," Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady but gentle. Layla's fingers trembled slightly as she tapped away at the keyboard, pulling up fragmented files and encrypted logs. "It's not just paranoia," she said at last, voice low. "There are things I don't remember, Ethan. Things that feel like they're supposed to be forgotten. Like someone's been erasing pieces of me." Ethan nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I've seen it happen. People caught in those experiments. They lose themselves." She swallowed hard, the weight of years of isolation pressing down. "I think I'm one of them, or at least I was. I don't know how much of what I remember is real and how much is implanted. It's like my own mind is a battlefield." Ethan reached out, hesitating for a moment before his hand brushed lightly against hers. "You're not alone in this. Whatever they did, we'll fight it together." For a moment, the cold barrier Layla had built around herself cracked, warmth blooming where there had only been shadows. Trust was an unfamiliar territory, but here, now it was a lifeline. The rain began to patter against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding of her heart. They shifted their focus to the mission ahead, pulling up the schematics of the skyscraper's lower levels. Lines and nodes glowed on the digital blueprint, revealing security checkpoints, ventilation shafts, and hidden access points. "If we're going to get to the sub-basement, we need to move fast and be invisible," Ethan said, tracing a path with his finger. "I can disable the external cameras for a small window, but inside, you'll have to use your skills to stay off the grid." Layla nodded, absorbing every detail. "And what about backup?" "Naomi's working on a medical protocol to help with memory stabilization if things go sideways. But we have to count on ourselves first." The plan was risky, but necessary. Each step deeper into the building meant peeling back layers of deception and danger. As they worked, the tension between them eased, replaced by a shared determination. Layla found herself searching Ethan's eyes for reassurance, and when he smiled, a rare, genuine smile, it was like a beacon in the encroaching darkness. "I don't want to lose you," Ethan admitted quietly. "You won't," Lila replied, her voice firmer. "Not this time." Hours slipped by as they finalized their strategy, the digital world their battleground. Outside, the storm raged, but inside this cramped room, a fragile alliance was forged, one built on trust, fear, and a desperate hope for truth. Lila glanced at the clock. Midnight was approaching. The city slept unaware that beneath its gleaming surface, two hackers were preparing to descend into the abyss. And with every keystroke, every whispered plan, the line between ally and enemy blurred, setting the stage for a confrontation that could change everything. She was no longer alone. But the question remained, could trust be enough to survive the darkness 10 floors below? The faint hum of the building's infrastructure reverberated softly, a constant reminder of the machine they sought to infiltrate. Ethan's hand rested steady on the panel's edge as Layla's fingers danced swiftly across her hacking device, overriding the electronic lock with practiced ease. The door gave a soft click and swung open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. A hidden passage that no tenant or staff member acknowledged, buried 10 floors beneath their feet. The air inside the shaft was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of machinery and the faintest trace of disinfectant. Layla's eyes flicked to Ethan, whose face was set in a grim mask of concentration. "You ready for this?" he whispered, voice low, barely audible over the faint whir of hidden motors. She nodded, swallowing a lump of unease. "We don't have a choice. This is where the truth waits." With careful steps, they descended, the only sounds the soft tap of their shoes against concrete and the occasional creak of aged metal. The dim emergency lights mounted on the walls cast long, jittering shadows that seemed to flicker with every movement, warping the sterile corridor into something sinister. Layla's mind raced with every scenario, traps, surveillance, even worse, yet she forced herself to focus on the task ahead. At the bottom, a heavy steel door barred their way. Ethan knelt, pulling a compact toolkit from his backpack. "Let me handle this," he murmured, fingers nimbly working to disable the manual locks. Minutes stretched as tension thickened the air, but finally the door groaned open, revealing a small, humming elevator shaft. The elevator was an anachronism, bulky, utilitarian, and seemingly forgotten by the gleaming skyscraper above. Lila stepped inside, the cold metal walls reflecting her steely expression. Ethan followed, and she pressed the call button marked B10. A faint clunk signaled the elevator's awakening, and it began its slow, deliberate descent. The confined space seemed to shrink around them as the elevator plunged into darkness. The only illumination came from a small, flickering panel above the doors, casting an eerie glow on their faces. Layla's pulse quickened, the silence broken only by the soft buzz of the elevator motor and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. "Do you think we'll find her?" Ethan asked quietly, eyes fixed on the dimming numbers that ticked down floor by floor. Layla hesitated. "I don't know, but we have to try." Suddenly, the elevator jolted, a shudder running through its frame. Ethan's hand shot out to steady himself. "Stay alert," he warned. "I'm sure they're watching." The door slid open onto a long, sterile corridor bathed in harsh fluorescent light. The air was unnervingly cold, clinical, a far cry from the luxury just floors above. Lila stepped out, scanning the surroundings. Rows of sealed doors lined the hallway, each marked with cryptic codes and warning signs. She swallowed her fear. "This is it," she said, voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. 10 floors below ground, and no one wants to admit it exists. Ethan nodded, pulling out a small device to monitor security feeds. "We're not alone down here. They've got eyes everywhere." Together they moved forward, every step echoing ominously in the vast, empty space. Layla's mind raced with possibilities. What secrets lay behind those doors? What horrors had been hidden from the world for so long? As they advanced deeper into the sub-basement, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting fleeting shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls. The building's chilling secret was no longer theoretical. It was real, tangible, and threatening. Layla's determination hardened. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it cost her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that with every step she took, the walls themselves were closing in. The descent had begun, and there was no turning back. "Stay close," she whispered to Ethan, glancing over her shoulder as distant footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder and more deliberate. "We're not alone." The fight for freedom had truly started, 10 floors below, in the heart of darkness. Layla exhaled slowly, pressing her back against the cold steel wall as the door slid open with a hiss, revealing a corridor bathed in a clinical, unforgiving white glow. The air was cooler here, tinged with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the faint metallic tang of machinery. Her eyes adjusted quickly, scanning the space before her. The sub-basement was nothing like the glossy luxury apartments she had come to know as home. Here, everything was utilitarian, designed for function over comfort, a labyrinth of polished concrete walls and gleaming steel doors. Ethan stepped beside her, his tall frame casting a long shadow against the stark corridor. His jaw was set, brows knit in concentration as he surveyed their surroundings. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly, though the tension in his voice betrayed his calm facade. Layla nodded, fingers curling tightly around the small hacking device she carried. No turning back now. They moved forward cautiously, their footsteps muffled against the smooth floor. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead was punctuated by the distant whirring of unseen machinery, a mechanical heartbeat that underscored the eerie stillness. Every sound seemed amplified their breathing, the soft clink of Lila's keys as she adjusted her pack, the faint rustle of fabric. Shadows flickered along the walls, thrown by the harsh lighting, turning the corridor into a place where menace seemed to lurk just out of sight. At the end of the hallway, a pair of sliding steel doors stood partially ajar, revealing a large chamber beyond. Lila approached first, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight. Rows of translucent pods lined the room, each softly glowing with an otherworldly blue light. Inside some indistinct shapes shifted figures reclining in suspended animation, their faces obscured by frosted glass. Others were empty, their interiors silent and still. A cold shiver ran down Lila's spine as she realized the purpose of these pods. They were not merely scientific curiosities, they were prisons for the mind, vessels of control and confinement. The digital interfaces beside each pod flickered with streams of data, complex graphs of brainwave patterns and coded readouts scrolling relentlessly. Lila's fingers itched to touch the controls, to breach the digital veil and uncover the full extent of the horrors concealed here. Ethan joined her side, pulling out his portable hacking rig. "Let's see what they're hiding," he murmured, voice low, but edged with urgency. His fingers danced across the keyboard, bypassing firewalls and decrypting layers of encryption with practiced ease. Files spilled onto their screen protocols detailing memory erasure procedures, emotional conditioning sequences, and psychological manipulation frameworks. The full scope of the corporation's experiments stretched before them in chilling clarity. Layla's heart pounded as she absorbed the implications. This was no mere research facility, it was a citadel of control, a place where identities were fractured and rewritten, where autonomy was stripped away in the name of profit and power. A sudden, shrill alarm shattered the heavy silence, red lights flooding the chamber in a harsh, urgent glow. The hum of machinery was replaced by the clatter of boots and the sharp commands of security personnel mobilizing. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip tight with adrenaline. "We've been made," she hissed, eyes darting toward a narrow maintenance hatch nearby. Without hesitation, Ethan kicked it open and they slipped inside, the cold metal pressing against their backs as the hatch sealed shut. The muffled sounds of pursuit echoed faintly above them. Breathless but resolute, Lila pressed her hand to the cool wall, steeling herself. The sub-basement's shadows were closing in, but so was her determination. She would not let the corporation's darkness consume her or the truth she sought. The fight had only just begun. As they crawled through the cramped maintenance tunnels, every heartbeat thrummed with dread and defiance. The secrets of the sub-basement were out in the open now, and with each passing second, the stakes grew higher. Leela's mind raced plans, contingencies, escape routes, while fragments of memory flickered at the edges of her consciousness, taunting and elusive. Yet, in that suffocating darkness, a spark of hope glimmered. They had glimpsed the machinery of control, and with that knowledge came power. To expose, to resist, to reclaim what had been stolen. The labyrinth below the skyscraper was a prison, yes, but it was also a battleground. And Leela Morgan was ready to fight. The walls, lined with rows of suspended glass panels, each flickered with digital portraits, faces she recognized. Some from fleeting encounters in the skyscraper's sleek corridors, others from the fragmented corners of her own memory. Her eyes locked onto one portrait in particular, the image warping and stabilizing to reveal a face she knew all too well, her own. The glow from the fluorescent lights above cast long, distorted shadows across her features, mirroring the turmoil roiling within her. She reached out, fingertips grazing the cool surface of the panel, the electronic hum vibrating faintly beneath her touch. It was as if the building itself was watching, waiting, whispering secrets only the brave or the desperate would dare uncover. "Layla," a voice whispered behind her, soft but urgent. She spun around to find Ethan Shaw stepping through the doorway, his rugged face etched with concern and determination. "You need to see this." Together, they approached a sleek console embedded into the wall, its holographic interface shimmering to life at Ethan's touch. Streams of encrypted data cascaded across the display, their complex patterns unraveling under Ethan's skilled fingers as he decrypted file after file. Each document peeled back another layer of the building's dark underbelly. Detailed logs of experiments, medical reports, and most disturbingly, personal files tied to the residents themselves. "Look at this," Ethan murmured, highlighting a file labeled with Lila's name. "They've been tracking you, Morgan." "More than that, they've been experimenting on you?" Layla's heart pounded, a mix of disbelief and creeping terror tightening its grip. She scanned the contents records of neurological scans, behavioral tests, notes on memory alterations. Images flickered, cold, clinical shots of a restrained figure in an experimental chamber. Electrodes affixed to their temples, eyes closed in forced slumber. Her eyes widened. That figure was her. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. "This can't be real." Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I wish it weren't. But we need to understand exactly what they've done if we want to stop them." The weight of the revelation pressed down on Leela, her own mind a battlefield where memories fought with shadows, truth tangled with fabrication. If her past could be rewritten, what of her future? Who was she beneath the layers of manipulation? Before she could answer, a soft step echoed from the corridor. Naomi Shin emerged from the shadows, her delicate frame tense, eyes flickering with a mix of fear and resolve. "I have more," she said quietly, pulling a small tablet from her coat. Research notes, patient logs, detailed accounts of the psychological conditioning protocols. They huddled together in the cold corridor, the antiseptic scent mingling with the electric tension. Naomi's voice barely rose above a whisper as she revealed the human cost behind the data residents reduced to test subjects. Identities fractured, lives erased or rewritten in the name of progress and profit. Lila clenched her fist, the swirling storm within her settling into a steely focus. "We're not just fighting a corporation," she said, voice fierce despite the fear gnawing at her. "We're fighting for who we are." A sudden flicker from the surveillance cameras overhead reminded them that their time was limited. The sub-basement was no sanctuary. It was a trap, a cage designed to keep truths buried beneath layers of silence and control. As they gathered the files, Leela's gaze drifted back to the flickering image of herself in the experimental chamber. The lines between victim and investigator blurred. But one thing remained clear. She would confront whatever darkness lay beneath the surface, no matter the cost. The building's heartbeat thrummed around them, a pulse of digital secrets and whispered lies. And somewhere in the depths, the faces from the past watched and waited. But Layla was no longer just a face in the crowd. She was a force awakened, a spark of rebellion ignited in the shadows. And the descent was only just beginning. The walls, a seamless blend of matte gray panels and pulsating LED strips, seemed to pulse with a life of their own, a mechanical heartbeat she could neither ignore nor escape. She paused at the threshold of a large chamber. The door sliding open without a sound to reveal rows of sleek devices, each humming with an electric pulse that sent a shiver down her spine. The room was bathed in cold blue light, casting long shadows that danced across the polished floors. Cables sprawled like serpents, connecting consoles to strange apparatuses that looked more like instruments from a sci-fi dystopia than medical devices. A steady scent of antiseptic hung in the air, tinged with the faint metallic odor of circuitry. Layla's fingers brushed lightly over the nearest console, the surface warm beneath her touch as a series of holographic screens flickered to life in response. Her breath caught as she scanned the data streams cascading before her eyes. Encrypted files, experimental logs, video feeds of subjects undergoing procedures. The realization settled like a stone in her gut. These machines were designed not just to observe, but to alter the very fabric of human memory. They were instruments of erasure and rewriting, tools capable of dismantling identity itself. Behind her, a soft voice broke the silence. "They call it the memory synthesis interface," Naomi Shun said, stepping forward with a nervous energy that belied her calm demeanor. "It's the heart of the project. It doesn't just remove memories, it replaces them, fabricates new experiences, rewires emotional responses." Layla turned to face the scientist, studying the delicate features framed by a crisp lab coat. Naomi's eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, the weight of knowledge pressing heavily on her shoulders. "How many people have been through this?" Layla asked, her voice low and steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Naomi hesitated, then pulled up a data file on a nearby terminal. Images of residents she recognized flickered across the screen, faces blurred or distorted, their expressions vacant. "More than you can imagine," she whispered. "Some don't even remember they were altered. Others have lost themselves entirely." A cold wave of horror washed over Layla as she processed the implications. The skyscraper was more than a home or a fortress of luxury. It was a prison for minds, a laboratory where autonomy was dismantled and identities were manufactured at the whim of corporate ambition. Her own memories suddenly felt fragile, like brittle glass threatening to shatter. The gaps, the lapses, the nagging sense of déjà vu, could they be the result of this technology? Had she already been subjected to the same manipulations she sought to expose? The thought was a knife twisting in her chest. "You're afraid," Naomi said softly, as if reading Layla's turmoil. "I am too, but the only way to fight this is to understand it, to gather proof and take it down from within." Layla nodded, steeling herself. "Then we keep moving." Before they could proceed further, an urgent alarm shattered the stillness. Red emergency lights flooded the room with a strobe-like intensity, casting frantic shadows across the walls. The machines emitted a rising chorus of beeps and warnings, security protocols activating with ruthless efficiency. "They've detected us," Naomi said, fingers flying over the controls to override lockdown sequences. "We have minutes, no, seconds. Get the data." "We need everything." Layla connected a portable drive to one of the consoles, her fingers trembling as files transferred at a dizzying pace. The room seemed to close in around her, the oppressive weight of surveillance tightening like a noose. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her mind racing to outpace the encroaching danger. As the last files downloaded, the chamber's door hissed shut, locking them in. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor outside, security forces closing in fast. "Time's up," Naomi said grimly. "We have what we came for. Now, let's get out of here." Layla took a deep breath, the taste of adrenaline sharp on her tongue. The horrifying truth was now in her hands, a weapon and a burden. She knew the path ahead would test every ounce of her resilience, but surrender was not an option. Not now, not ever. With one last glance at the cold, glowing machines, the instruments of a mind's prison, she stepped back into the shadows, ready to fight for the freedom of memory and identity itself. But as the door sealed behind them, a whisper of doubt lingered in her mind. How much of herself had already been rewritten? And was there still a way back to the truth? Layla's breath was shallow, her heart pounding in her ears as she exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. They had come too far to turn back now, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Somewhere ahead, footsteps echoed sharply, too precise, too deliberate. "Someone's coming," Ethan whispered, voice taut. He slid a hand into his jacket pocket, fingers wrapping around a small but sturdy crowbar he'd grabbed earlier. Layla's fingers hovered over the portable terminal strapped to her wrist, ready to hack any door or system that might block their path. The footsteps grew louder, reverberating off the concrete like a warning drumbeat. Then, from the shadows emerged a figure muscular, imposing, clad in tactical black gear that seemed to absorb the dim light. Javier Cruz, the building's security chief and the embodiment of the corporation's iron grip on this place. His cold eyes locked onto them, unflinching and merciless. "End of the line," he said, voice calm but edged with menace. Leela's mind raced. Escape seemed impossible in this narrow corridor, and retreat would only mean being trapped somewhere else. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the path with a confident grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're not looking for trouble, Cruz, just passing through." Javier's lips twitched into a faint, humorless smile. "You're trespassing on restricted ground. That's trouble enough." Without warning, he lunged. The suddenness of his attack sent a shock through Lila and Ethan. Javier's tactical training was evident, each move precise, calculated, overwhelming. Ethan swung the crowbar in a wide arc, but Javier ducked easily, countering with a sharp jab that connected with Ethan's ribs. Layla darted to the side, heart hammering, fingers scrambling over her terminal to override the corridor's security gate. But Javier was relentless, closing the distance with deadly efficiency. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Ethan used the crowbar to parry and jab, buying Lila precious seconds. She spotted a loose panel on the wall and yanked it free, revealing a tangle of exposed wires. With a quick flick, she disrupted the corridor's lighting, plunging them into near darkness. "Now," she hissed. Ethan shoved Javier backward as Leela ducked into the shadows, her breath ragged. The sudden blackout disoriented their pursuer, but he recovered quickly, his silhouette a dark menace against the faint emergency lights. They moved as one, slipping through a side door Lila had unlocked moments before. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind them, muffling the sounds of pursuit but doing little to still their pounding hearts. Inside, the air was colder, tinged with the sterile scent of antiseptic and electric ozone. The sub-basement's maze of corridors stretched endlessly, each turn a question mark, each shadow a potential threat. Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "We can't keep running like this. He's not going to stop." Layla's gaze hardened. "Then we don't have a choice." "We go deeper, find the core. Expose everything." The fight had left them shaken, but more resolute than ever. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemy never closer. Their footsteps echoed softly as they ventured further into the labyrinth, every sound amplified by the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. As they disappeared down another corridor, the faint glow of monitors flickered in the distance, a reminder that this was only the beginning. The sub-basement held secrets darker than they had imagined, and Javier Cruz was only the first guardian standing between them and the truth. Lila's fingers tightened into fists. No matter the cost, she would not let the shadows consume her, not now. Not ever. And somewhere beyond the cold steel walls, the mastermind watched, calculating the next move in a deadly game of cat and mouse that was far from over. Digital monitors flickered with streams of encrypted data, casting an eerie glow over the glass and steel surfaces. Layla Morgan's breath hitched the moment she stepped inside. There, standing with an effortless grace behind a sleek console, was Dr. Marcus Vell, the man whose name had haunted her investigation from the start. His figure was impeccable, tailored suit, thin-rimmed glasses perched precisely on his nose, eyes cold and calculating beneath the harsh illumination. He didn't flinch as she crossed the threshold, nor did his lips twitch in surprise. Instead, he regarded her with a steady, almost clinical gaze, as if assessing an anomaly worthy of study rather than a threat. "Ms. Morgan," Marcus greeted, voice smooth and steady. "I wondered when you might finally arrive." Layla's hands curled into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Your experiments have ruined lives," she said, voice sharp. "Manipulating memories, controlling minds, it's monstrous." A faint smile ghosted across Marcus's lips, enigmatic and unsettling. Monstrous or evolution. Humanity has always sought to transcend its limitations. This is merely the next step, perfecting control over the mind to eliminate chaos, suffering, and error. She shook her head, the weight of her fragmented memories pressing heavily on her. "You erase people's identities. You steal what makes them human." His eyes flickered with something almost like regret. "I once believed differently, but personal loss teaches harsh lessons. My wife, my daughter, they were lost to randomness, to fate. If I can develop technology to control the mind, to prevent such tragedies, the cost is justified. Layla's heart pounded with a complex mixture of sympathy and revulsion. Here was a man broken by grief, yet consumed by an ambition so vast it blinded him to the humanity he claimed to protect. "You're playing God," she said, voice trembling with anger and sorrow. "But you're destroying the very essence of what makes us free." Marcus's gaze hardened. "Freedom is an illusion when chaos reigns. My work will bring order, purpose, and peace." The room seemed to contract around them, the tension thick and suffocating. Layla's mind raced. Every detail, every word was a thread in the complex tapestry of this conspiracy. She realized that breaking Marcus's resolve wouldn't be a matter of brute force, but of exposing the fragile humanity beneath his cold exterior. "I won't let you get away with this," Layla vowed, stepping closer. "I'll show the world what you've done." He chuckled softly, a sound devoid of warmth. "Then prepare yourself, Ms. Morgan, because this battle is far from over." As Marcus turned back to his console, fingers dancing over the interface, Layla felt the weight of the moment settle upon her. The mastermind was no longer an abstract enemy, but a man with scars and secrets, and a dangerous determination to reshape reality itself. Their confrontation marked the beginning of a final, harrowing descent into the depths of the skyscraper's darkest secrets, where the fate of countless minds hung in the balance. The air thrummed with the hum of machines and the unspoken promise of conflict. A duel not just of technology, but of wills and ideals, a battle that would test Layla's resilience and the very fabric of her identity. With a steadying breath, she prepared to face the storm. The mastermind had been revealed, but the fight was only just beginning. The air was cool, tinged faintly with the sterile scent of antiseptics and humming electronics. Ahead, Dr. Marcus Vell stood perfectly still, impeccably dressed as always, his cold eyes peering behind thin-rimmed glasses. The faint mechanical whirring of servers and the low hum of digital equipment filled the room, underscoring an oppressive atmosphere of calculated control. "Welcome, Layla," Vell said smoothly, his voice steady and calm, betraying no hint of the storm that raged beneath his placid exterior. "I've been expecting you." Layla met his gaze, her piercing eyes unfaltering despite the knot of tension tightening in her chest. "I'm here to end this, Marcus." He smiled thinly, a gesture devoid of warmth. "End this, or perhaps you seek to understand the inevitable." With a subtle gesture, he activated a nearby console. Instantly, holographic projections bloomed into the era-swirling montage of images and data streams that painted a vision of the future. Cities bathed in artificial light, citizens moving in synchronized patterns, expressions serene but vacant, children learning through immersive neural interfaces. Governments and corporations seamlessly entwined in a new order where chaos had been eradicated, not through brute force, but through the quiet recalibration of the mind. "This," Vell intoned, "is the future I am crafting. A world where human conflict is minimized because we control the variables, memory, emotion, identity. Imagine the suffering we can prevent, the efficiency we can achieve." Layla's breath caught. The images were dazzling and terrifying in equal measure. She saw herself in the crowd, one face among millions, her thoughts no longer her own. The weight of his vision pressed down on her like a physical force. "You call it control?" she said steadily, "but it's nothing less than obliteration. Erasing what makes us human, the freedom to choose, to remember, to feel." Vell's eyes narrowed, but he did not waver. Freedom is a luxury that breeds chaos. Order requires sacrifice, and I am the architect of that order. You, of all people, should understand the cost of uncontrolled freedom. Leela's fists clenched. Memories flickered at the edges of her mind, fragments of experiments. Moments lost, a creeping fog threatening to swallow her identity. But within that storm, a fierce spark of defiance blazed. "I'm not your experiment," she said, voice low and resolute, "and I won't be your puppet." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The holograms danced silently between them, casting shifting light and shadow over their faces. Then, a sudden flicker of power caused the room to dim briefly, long shadows stretching across the floor. Vel's gaze locked with hers, an unspoken challenge passing between them. Then prepare yourself, Lila, because this battle isn't just for you, it's for the soul of humanity. The air thickened with tension as Lila steadied herself, every sense on edge. The confrontation that had loomed since she first uncovered the sub-basement was now inevitable. Her mind raced, strategizing, analyzing, preparing for the fight to come not just with code and cyber skills, but with everything she was. "I'm ready," she whispered, the spark of rebellion burning brighter than ever. "And I will stop you." Outside the chamber, the distant hum of security protocols and the watchful eyes of unseen cameras were reminders that this was no longer just a battle of wills, it was a war fought in shadows, in silence, beneath the surface of the world she thought she knew. As the holographic images faded, leaving only the cold glow of monitors and the sterile hum of machinery, Layla took a deep breath. The future Dr. Vel envisioned was a nightmare, but she would fight to ensure it never came to pass. The fight for freedom, identity, and truth was only just beginning. Her descent into darkness had revealed horrors beyond her imagination, but it had also forged a resolve that no amount of mind control could break. 10 floors below, in the heart of the skyscraper, the battle for the soul of humanity was underway, and Lila Morgan was its fiercest guardian. The chamber's door slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, sealing the moment in a fragile silence. The final confrontation loomed, and with it, the hope that even beneath the deepest control, the human spirit could endure. Layla's eyes burned with determination as she stepped forward, ready to face the darkness and to light the way out. The chair she was strapped into was cold and unyielding, its metal arms clamping around her wrists and ankles with clinical precision. Electrodes, thin and intrusive, adhered to her temples and scalp, their faint pricks a constant reminder of the invasive procedure underway. Around her, the room pulsed with an eerie blue glow from the digital interface that encased the chamber, a cage of technology designed to reach deep inside her mind and unravel the carefully woven threads of her memories. Her breath came in shallow bursts, chest rising and falling as panic threatened to take hold. Yet beneath the rising tide of fear burned a core of fierce determination. "I will not let them take me," she whispered, voice barely audible over the low hum of machines. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, darted around the room, seeking any point of leverage in the maze of data streams and sterile walls. Dr. Marcus Vel stood silently nearby, a figure of cold calculation. His thin-rimmed glasses caught the light of the monitors, his eyes sharp and unyielding behind them. "You must understand, Ms. Morgan," he said, voice smooth and devoid of empathy. "This is not personal, it is evolution. Control is necessary to prevent chaos. Your memories, your identity, they are variables in an equation we intend to solve." Layla's gaze locked with his, defiance flaring despite the creeping numbness in her limbs. "You're erasing who I am to protect your profit margins," she spat, voice trembling but resolute. "I won't be your experiment." Outside the chamber, in a cramped control room thick with tension, Ethan Shaw and Dr. Naomi Chun worked in tandem, their fingers flying over keyboards and touchscreens. Ethan's rugged features were etched with sweat, his usual easy smile replaced by a grim set of determination. "We're getting close," he muttered, eyes scanning lines of code streaming past. Naomi's delicate face was taut with worry, her brow furrowed as she monitored Lila's vital signs and neural feedback. If they push any harder, she might lose everything. "We have to disrupt the process now." Their whispered voices mingled with the mechanical symphony of whirring fans and blinking lights, a desperate chorus against the clinical backdrop. They were Lila's lifeline, tethering her to the outside world as the invasive technology gnawed at her mind. Inside Lila's consciousness, memories flickered like fragile flame faces of friends and foes, the echo of past betrayals, the warmth of fleeting moments of hope. But the assault was relentless. The technology probed, rewrote, and sought to erase these mental imprints. Each flash of pain was a battle, each moment of clarity a victory. She clung to the fragments, repeating names and images in her mind like a mantra. "Remember who you are?" she urged herself, voice a fragile thread woven through the storm. The line between reality and manipulation blurred. Fragments of her identity threatened to dissolve into the void. Marcus watched impassively, convinced of the righteousness of his vision even as Leela's resistance chipped away at the efficacy of his methods. "She's stronger than anticipated," he admitted to his team, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Adjust the parameters. We cannot allow this anomaly to persist." But the cracks in the system were beginning to show. Ethan and Naomi's coordinated cyber assault outside the chamber disrupted the neural interface, sending erratic pulses that gave Lila precious moments of respite. With every interruption, Lila's grip on herself tightened, the fog of erased memories lifting ever so slightly. The battle was as much within her mind as in the cold corridors of the skyscraper's sub-basement. A war waged in silence and shadows, with stakes that transcended physical survival. To lose her memories would mean to lose herself entirely, to become a hollow vessel for corporate ambition. As the procedure faltered, Layla's eyes snapped open, a spark of life and recognition blazing through the haze. "I'm still here," she thought fiercely. "They won't win." Her voice, barely a whisper at first, grew stronger with each breath. "You can't erase me." "Not yet." Outside, Ethan's fingers flew faster, a triumphant glint in his eyes. Naomi's nervous smile was a fragile beacon of hope amid the encroaching darkness. The battle was far from over, but the breaking point had passed. Lila Morgan had survived the onslaught and, in doing so, had uncovered a weakness in the corporation's impenetrable armor. The next moves would be critical, and the stakes higher than ever. Her mind, fractured but unbroken, was her weapon now, and she was ready to wield it. The clinical chamber's lights dimmed momentarily as the last shock waves of the disrupted interface settled. Layla's breathing steadied, her pulse slowing from a frantic race to a resolute beat. The room seemed to exhale with her, the oppressive atmosphere lifting just enough to allow a breath of hope. Dr. Vell's eyes narrowed, calculating the implications. "This isn't the end," he vowed quietly, a promise as chilling as the sterile air that surrounded them. "Control is inevitable," but Layla's defiant gaze met his, unyielding. "Not while I'm alive." The war for her mind was only beginning, and she was ready to fight. Outside the chamber, Ethan exhaled sharply, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "She's holding on," he said, voice low but steady. Naomi nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "For now, but we need a plan. Something to break them for good." Together, they turned back to their screens, the glow of the data reflecting the fierce determination that bound them. In the labyrinth beneath the city, 10 floors below, the shadows stirred, but so did the resistance. Lila Morgan was still here, and she was fighting back. Ethan Shaw sat hunched over his workstation, the glow from 3 monitors casting sharp shadows across his rugged face. His fingers tapped with surgical precision over the keyboard, weaving through layers of firewalls and encryption like a ghost slipping through walls. Every keystroke was a calculated strike against a faceless enemy, the corporation's iron grip tightening around the skyscraper and its sinister secrets. Behind him, a dim red light blinked on a server rack, a quiet sentinel guarding the treasure trove of data Ethan and Lila sought to expose. "Almost there," Ethan muttered, eyes flickering between schematics and code. "Naomi, you still good on your end?" The faint crackle of their encrypted channel answered back. "Yes, but I'm worried about being spotted. The cameras in the lab have high sensitivity, and I can't afford to linger." Naomi Chen's voice was steady but carried the edge of contained anxiety. In the sterile, brightly lit lab far above, Naomi's delicate fingers danced over a portable terminal, transferring critical files she had risked her career to acquire. She glanced nervously at the door, heart pounding as footsteps echoed faintly outside. Her breath hitched, but she pressed on, knowing her sacrifice was essential. These files contained the blueprint of the mind control experiments, the digital fingerprints of the corporation's darkest ambitions. Back in the depths of the skyscraper's hidden sub-basement, Lila Morgan crouched behind a row of humming machinery, her sharp eyes scanning the corridors for any sign of movement. The faint whir of servers and the occasional buzz of a distant alarm were the only companions in the oppressive silence. Her earpiece crackled softly. "Ethan, status?" We're in. Cameras are looping. You've got a 5-minute window before the system kicks back in, Ethan replied, voice tight with anticipation. Move fast. Lila's heart hammered in her chest as she slipped out from cover, her footsteps muffled by the thick industrial carpeting. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the cavernous underground. She accessed a terminal embedded in the wall, fingers flying over the touchpad to bypass security protocols. The digital assault waged by Ethan and Naomi was her lifeline. Without it, she'd be blind and vulnerable. Naomi, any update on the external systems? Lila whispered, barely audible. Still feeding you data? Watch your six, there's chatter on the security comms. They know something's off, Naomi warned. The tension coiled tighter as alarms suddenly blared somewhere deep within the sub-basement. Lila froze, heart in her throat. Ethan's voice came through, sharper now. They're onto us. I'm pushing harder to keep their eyes off you, but the system's fighting back. Sweat beaded on Lila's forehead as she initiated a secondary breach aimed at disabling the lockdown protocols that could trap her underground. Her mind raced, every second counted. She could almost feel the eyes of the corporation's security apparatus closing in like a predator. Meanwhile, Ethan's fingers moved faster than ever, launching a barrage of cyberattacks designed to overload the building's AI-driven defenses. Each strike was a gamble, risking detection but necessary to buy Lila the precious moments she needed. Naomi, from her hidden vantage, monitored the flow of data, her fingers trembling slightly as she countered the corporation's attempts to trace their incursion. Lila, you're clear to move to the next node, Ethan instructed, relief barely perceptible in his voice. But after that, we've got maybe 2 minutes before they reboot the system. Lila's nod was invisible, but resolute. She sprinted through the sterile corridors, the sterile smell of antiseptic and cold metal filling her nostrils. The sub-basement's lights flickered as Ethan's cyber barrage struck hard, casting long, jittering shadows across the walls. Suddenly, a faint voice cut through the static in her earpiece. Javier Cruz is mobilizing patrols. You need to be ready to move fast. Naomi's voice was low but urgent. The name triggered a flash of cold dread in Lila's gut. Javier Cruz, Marcus Vell's ruthless security chief, was an unyielding force. She tightened her grip on the small data drive she had just extracted from the terminal. Her mission was far from over, but for this moment, she was alive and one step closer to exposing the nightmare beneath the skyscraper. The comms fell silent for a heartbeat before Ethan cracked a grin in his voice. Good job down there, Lila. We're all in this together. Layla's breath caught at the simple reassurance. In the darkness of betrayal, surveillance, and erased memories, their fragile alliance was a flicker of light. But as the alarms began their slow climb back to full power, she knew the fight was only just beginning. And somewhere in the shadows, Dr. Marcus Vell was watching, calculating, waiting for the next move. The stakes had never been higher, and the allies in the dark were racing against time to shatter the corporation's hold on truth and identity. The night stretched on, endless and merciless, but Lila Morgan's resolve burned brighter than ever. She would fight, no matter the cost. The future depended on it. Lila Morgan moved silently between towering racks of blinking hardware, each one a fortress of digital secrets. She kept her breath shallow, her movements deliberate. Eyes darting over lines of code and encrypted data streams cascading across her portable terminal. This was the core, the heart of the labyrinthine system controlling the sinister experiments beneath the skyscraper. You're in, Ethan's voice crackled softly through her earpiece, steady and reassuring. Firewall's holding, but the countermeasures are tightening. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they reroute security protocols? Layla's fingers danced across the keyboard, bypassing layers of encryption with practiced precision. Each command was a calculated risk. One wrong move and the entire system would lock down, trapping her in a digital cage with no escape. She swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied every hack, that inexplicable blend of fear and exhilaration. Around her, the room was bathed in sterile, bluish light, reflecting off the polished floors and cold metal surfaces. The faint scent of ozone from the servers mingled with the stale air, a constant reminder of the artificial environment she had infiltrated. Her heart pounded in her ears as she located the data nodes containing files on the mind manipulation experiments, the proof she needed to expose the corporation's darkest secrets. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing beep shattered the silence. Red emergency lights flooded the room, bathing everything in a sinister glow. The alarm screamed through the speakers, echoing off the walls. Lila's breath hitched. "Security breach detected," a cold voice announced over the intercom. "They're on to you," Ethan warned urgently. "You need to move now." "I'm scrambling the cameras, but they'll be here any second." Hands trembling slightly, Lila accelerated her download, the progress bar inching forward agonizingly slow. Outside the data center, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors, the unmistakable sound of approaching security forces. Javier Cruz, Marcus Vell's relentless security chief, was known for his ruthlessness and tactical precision. Lila's mind raced. She had anticipated a confrontation, but the timing was brutal. She ducked behind a server rack, the cold metal pressing against her back as she frantically typed commands to complete the extraction. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she felt the walls closing in, the digital and physical threats merging into a suffocating pressure. "Almost there," she muttered, teeth clenched. "Hold on." Ethan's voice remained a lifeline, calm amidst the chaos. "I'm keeping their systems scrambled for as long as I can, but this won't hold forever. You need an exit strategy." The door to the data center slammed open. Javier Cruz stepped inside, his imposing figure silhouetted against the red emergency lights. His cold gaze swept the room, narrowing as he spotted the faint glow of Lila's terminal screen. "End of the line," he said quietly, drawing a stun baton from his belt. Lila's pulse quickened. There was no time for hesitation. She sprang from her hiding spot, sprinting toward the narrow maintenance hatch Ethan had located earlier. Cruz lunged after her, the crackle of electricity buzzing in the charged air. Layla's hand shot out, slamming the hatch open and pulling herself inside just as Cruz's baton grazed her shoulder. The hatch sealed shut behind her, plunging her into darkness. She gasped, pain flaring but determination burning brighter. In her hands, the terminal beeped. Download complete. The evidence was in her possession. "Got it," she whispered, voice hoarse but triumphant. "Now we expose them." Yet, even as relief coursed through her veins, a new dread settled in. The fight was far from over. The corporation would come for her with everything they had, and the deeper shadows of the skyscraper still held countless secrets waiting to be unraveled. Layla closed her eyes for a moment, steeling herself. This was the tipping edge, the precipice between exposure and oblivion. She would not fall. "Ethan," she said, voice steady, "let's finish this." And with that, she plunged deeper into the darkness, the battle for truth only just beginning. Soft cables and sensors adhered delicately to Lila temples and forehead, a technological embrace that felt both alien and oddly comforting. The small safe house, tucked away in a forgotten part of the city, was a stark contrast to the cold, clinical environments Lila had glimpsed in the building's sub-basement. Here, the air was thick with anticipation and a faint scent of jasmine from a candle Naomi had lit to ease the tension. Layla sat rigidly on the worn leather chair, her sharp eyes flicking to Naomi's calm, observant face. "Are you ready?" Naomi asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but steady enough to anchor Layla's swirling thoughts. "I have to be," Lila plied, swallowing hard. "I can't keep living with these gaps like someone's been erasing pieces of me." Naomi nodded, adjusting the sensors with practiced precision. "We're going to try something different today. Neurofeedback to help stabilize the neural pathways disrupted by whatever they did to you. It's delicate, but it might help you reclaim the fragments of your memory without overwhelming your system." Layla took a deep breath, the metallic taste of adrenaline sharp in her mouth. She closed her eyes as Naomi began the session, soft lights blinking on the interface, reflecting patterns of brain activity. Within moments, the familiar chaos of fragmented memories surged forward, faces she couldn't place. Voices echoing in half-remembered conversations, the cold sterility of the sub-basement corridors. The flood was disorienting. Layla's breath hitched as flashes of herself, frightened, angry, determined, flickered behind closed eyelids. She felt the weight of years compressed into fractured moments, a puzzle missing too many pieces. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, blurring the harsh edges of her mental landscape. "Focus on my voice," Naomi urged gently, her hand steady on Layla's shoulder. "Ground yourself. You're safe here? You're in control?" Layla gritted her teeth, clutching the armrest as the waves crashed. Slowly, the chaos began to settle. The fragmented images started to coalesce, edges smoothing into shapes she could recognize. Memories weren't perfect, scars and distortions remained, but the solid core of her identity began to reassert itself. "You're doing great," Naomi encouraged, her eyes reflecting a mixture of empathy and scientific curiosity. "These sessions will help reinforce your neural pathways. It's not about erasing the past, but reclaiming it on your terms." Hours passed in this delicate dance between mind and machine. The outside world faded as Layla delved deeper into the recesses of her consciousness, battling the invasive manipulations imposed on her. Each breakthrough was a victory, each relapse a reminder of the stakes. At one point, a particularly harrowing memory pierced through. A shadowy figure in a lab, cold instruments, whispered threats about compliance and control. Layla's body tensed, a shudder rippling through her frame. But Naomi's steady presence was a lifeline anchoring her back from the brink. When the session finally ended, Layla opened her eyes to the soft amber glow of dawn filtering through the curtains. The world felt sharper, her mind clearer, though the emotional cost weighed heavy. She met Naomi's gaze and managed a weary smile. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me fall apart." Naomi returned the smile, a flicker of hope shining through her own exhaustion. "We're just getting started." With her memory stabilized, Layla felt a renewed sense of purpose. The murky veil that had obscured her past was lifting, and with it, the paralyzing fear that had threatened to consume her. She was ready to face the labyrinth of lies and manipulation once more, stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. As she stood, the weight of the skyscraper's secrets pressed down, but so did the fierce fire of resistance within her. The fragments of her past had been reclaimed, but the war was far from over. Somewhere, deep beneath the city, the hidden sub-basement awaited, and with it, the truth that could change everything. Layla's piercing gaze hardened. She was no longer just a victim of the experiment, she was its reckoning. And the countdown had begun. His hands moved with precise, practiced rhythm over the keyboards, fingers tapping commands that rippled through cyberspace. Each line of code was a calculated strike against the fortress of firewalls guarding the skyscraper's darkest secrets. Layla Morgan stood nearby, eyes fixed on her own screen, fingers ready but restrained. The room was thick with tension, the kind that made breaths shallow and time stretch thin. Ethan's face, illuminated by the digital glow, betrayed a fierce determination tempered by the knowledge of what was at stake. "Almost there," Ethan murmured, voice low, eyes flicking between multiple data streams. "This firewall's tougher than I thought. They've layered detection protocols that can trace us in seconds if I slip up." Layla's pulse quickened. "We don't have much time. Once you crack it, I need to dive in and grab the files. We have to get the broadcast running before they shut us out." The skyscraper loomed outside the rain-streaked window, an unyielding monolith hiding 10 floors of malevolent secrets beneath its glass facade. Tonight it was a digital battleground. Ethan's fingers accelerated, bypassing one encrypted barrier after another. Suddenly, a series of red alerts blinked on his screen. "They're countering, active trace protocols are engaging." "We've been detected," he said, voice tight. A bead of sweat traced down Layla's temple. "Keep going. That back door has to hold." The cyber defenses launched waves of countermeasures, malware, trace packets, firewall reinforcements, each assault met with Ethan's deft skill. The room pulsed with the quiet chaos of an invisible war waged in bits and bytes. Then, a sliver of opportunity, a narrow breach in the firewall flickered open. Ethan's fingers flew, widening the digital gap just enough for Layla to slip through. Instantly, her screen flooded with encrypted files, logs, experimental data, video feeds, the evidence she'd fought so hard to find. "I'm in," Layla breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Starting data extraction and broadcasting protocols now." Outside the window, distant sirens wove through the night air, an ominous reminder of the corporation's vigilance. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion flickering across his face. I'm pulling out before they trace us completely. You've got one shot, make it count. Layla's fingers danced over the keyboard, deploying scripts to disseminate the files across unsecured networks and social media channels. The broadcast would be live, raw, and unfiltered, a digital scream exposing the sub-basement's horrors to the world. As the data streamed, a sudden spike in network traffic set off alarms on Lila's screen. Security forces were mobilizing, their digital fingerprints quickening the corporation's defensive maneuvers. They know, Layla said, heart pounding. I'm almost done. Ethan, cover me if they try to lock me out. Through the window, the city's neon glow flickered, reflecting the chaotic pulse of a battle fought in silence, but with stakes as lethal as any physical confrontation. Time was running out, and failure meant not just losing the fight, but losing themselves to the erasure engineered in those hidden floors below. With a final keystroke, Lila sent the last packets of data into the ether. The broadcast ignited across screens and devices, a beacon of truth piercing the corporate veil. She exhaled sharply, but the victory was tempered by the knowledge that this night was far from over. Somewhere, behind fortified walls and watchful eyes, the forces she dared to defy were rallying for a counterstrike. Ethan's voice crackled through the encrypted comlink, steady and resolute. You did it, Lila. Now, let's get out of here before they come for us. The network breach was complete, a digital gateway flung open in defiance. But the shadows lurking beneath the skyscraper were already stirring, and the descent into the depths of deception was only just beginning. Lila glanced at the blinking cursor on her screen, the live broadcast rolling out to an unsuspecting world. Somewhere in the labyrinth 10 floors below, Dr. Marcus Vell's empire of control was trembling. And so was she. Outside, the rain drummed steadily against the window pane, a relentless assault that mirrored the storm raging within her mind. Each file she cracked open peeled back another layer of the corporation's tangled web, and with it came revelations more devastating than the last. It was Ethan's name that flickered on the screen, a series of encrypted communications between him and an unknown contact within the corporation. The messages were brief but loaded, coordinates, times, and cryptic warnings. A cold knot tightened in Lila's stomach. Could Ethan, her trusted confidant, be the mole she had feared? Was the man who had stood beside her through countless digital battles now undermining everything? Her fingers trembled as she replayed their last conversation, the easy camaraderie, the quiet moments of trust. Had it all been a lie? The room felt suddenly claustrophobic, the hum of the machines deafening. She leaned back, eyes closing briefly as a surge of disbelief and betrayal washed over her. Determined to confront the truth, Lila arranged a meeting with Ethan, the chosen spot, an abandoned parking garage far from prying eyes. The night air was cold and sharp, breaths forming fleeting clouds as they met beneath the harsh glare of flickering fluorescent lights. Ethan's usual confident smile was absent, replaced by a wary tension that mirrored her own. Layla, he began, voice low and steady, I owe you an explanation. You've been feeding information to Marcus, she accused, voice tight with hurt. Why? Who are you really working for? Ethan's jaw clenched. It's not what you think. I'm trying to protect you. The deeper I go, the more dangerous it gets. But the cracks in their alliance were too deep. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Leela's mind raced through every shared plan, every whispered confidence. Could she afford to trust him any longer? Seeking clarity, Lila reached out to Naomi Chun, the scientist whose ethical struggle paralleled her own. They met in the stark underground server room where the air hummed with electric charge and the faint scent of ozone. Naomi's delicate hands shook slightly as she handed over data files revealing a network of double agents embedded within the corporation and the project. They're watching us, Naomi whispered, eyes darting nervously. Even those closest to us could be compromised. The weight of Naomi's confession pressed heavily on Layla's shoulders. The lines between friend and foe blurred in the cold light of surveillance and espionage. No sooner had she absorbed the new information than a sharp alarm shattered the fragile calm. Javier Cruz, the unyielding security chief, had tracked her to the control hub. The room erupted into chaos, the metallic clang of weapons, the staccato beep of security systems, and the sharp scent of adrenaline hung thick in the air. Layla's mind raced, fingers flying over the keyboard as she worked to override the lockdown protocols. Every second was a battle between survival and capture. She ducked behind consoles, heart hammering as guards closed in. The stakes had never been higher. In the midst of the turmoil, Lila's thoughts flickered to the betrayals uncovered, the fragile alliances shattered by secrets and lies, yet beneath the turmoil a fierce resolve blazed. She would expose the conspiracy, no matter the cost, no matter the enemy's face, even if that enemy walked beside her. As the chapter draws to a close, Lila escapes the control hub by a hair's breadth, leaving behind a trail of digital chaos and uncertainty. The question lingers in the charged silence: who can she trust when betrayal echoes from every shadow? The night outside is still heavy with rain, but within Layla, a storm of determination begins to rise anew. The game has changed, and the stakes are higher than ever. Her fight is far from over. The depths of deception have been revealed, but so has the depth of her resolve. And in the shadows, the unseen eyes of the corporation watch and wait for her next move. Naomi Chun worked feverishly beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. The glow from the multiple monitors cast eerie shadows across their determined faces, reflecting files and video feeds that held the power to shatter the corporate fortress Marcus Vell had built. Layla's fingers danced over the keyboard, her mind racing to bypass the last layers of encryption protecting the broadcast channel. "Almost there," she muttered, voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Ethan leaned in, eyes scanning security feeds for any sign of incoming threats. "They're not far," he warned, his voice low but laced with urgency. "Cruz's team is moving fast. We have maybe 5 minutes before they breach this floor." Naomi, pale but resolute, adjusted the audio settings, ensuring the sound quality would carry the gravity of their revelations unfiltered. "If we don't get this out now, it might never see the light of day," she said, swallowing her fear. "All those people. Their lives erased, manipulated, they deserve to know." Lila swallowed the lump in her throat and glanced at the encrypted folders labeled with chilling precision. Memory rewrites, emotional conditioning, subject logs, each file a testament to human lives violated beneath their feet. "Ready?" she said finally, fingers poised. Outside the control room, a cacophony of heavy boots reverberated down the cold concrete corridors. Javier Cruz, Marcus Vell's relentless security chief, led his team with ruthless efficiency. The corridors pulsed with the red glow of emergency lights, casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to close in on the trio. The building's usual hum was replaced by alarms blaring in shrill bursts, adding a frantic rhythm to the unfolding siege. "They're almost here," Ethan whispered, eyes flickering between the approaching threat and the screens. "Layla, you need to start the broadcast now." Taking a deep breath, Layla hit the final command. The system blinked, hesitated, then surged to life. On screens across the skyscraper and beyond, images flickered into view, faces of residents who were never told their minds were battlegrounds. Video footage of stark, sterile chambers where experiments twisted memory and identity. Confidential documents spilled across the digital landscape, revealing the corporation's tangled web of deceit and manipulation. For a moment, silence fell over the room, the gravity of the exposure settling like a shroud. Then the door burst open. "Stop them!" Cruz barked, storming in with his team. Ethan sprang into action, engaging the guards with a mix of quick moves and improvised defense. The fight was brutal but brief. Every second Ethan bought was a lifeline for Layla. Naomi's fingers flew over the keyboard, monitoring the broadcast's reach. "We're live everywhere," she called out, voice taut with hope. "People are watching." The battle spilled into the cramped space, but Lila's gaze never wavered from the screens. She watched as the corporate veil was torn down for the world to see. Her own fragmented memories, once a source of torment, now fueled her resolve. This was more than exposure. It was a reclaiming of stolen identities. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder, the city awakening to the scandal unfolding within its glass heart. The skyscraper, once a symbol of luxury and control, now stood as a beacon of defiance. As Ethan was forced back, bruised but unyielding, Lila's mind raced ahead. The broadcast was just the beginning. The fallout would be fierce, the enemies relentless. But in this moment, drenched in the stark light of truth, she felt a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim not just her own life, but the autonomy of everyone trapped beneath 10 floors of lies. "We did it," Naomi whispered, voice trembling. Layla nodded, eyes fierce. "This fight isn't over, it's just begun." And as the screens continued to stream the unveiled horrors, the countdown to freedom and to reckoning had truly begun. Every nerve in her body screamed at the peril of what lay ahead, but the years of isolated hacking, countless nights spent unraveling digital labyrinths, and the recent alliance with Ethan Shaw steeled her resolve. Beside her, Ethan's silhouette moved with practiced silence, eyes scanning, muscles taut, ready to spring into action. Ahead, the hum of machinery grew louder, a subtle, rhythmic pulse that betrayed the presence of the core control room. This was the heart of the sinister project that had turned this luxury skyscraper into a prison of minds. 10 floors below ground, where no light of day or hope had ever touched, Dr. Marcus Vell awaited. The man whose cold calculations had erased memories, manipulated identities, and shattered lives? Layla's fingers twitched with anticipation, the weight of her portable hacking deck snug in her backpack a comforting anchor. The plan was simple but perilous: infiltrate the core, confront Vell, and broadcast the damning evidence stored within the system's deepest vaults. What came after depended on her ability to outwit a man who had spent years perfecting control. They rounded a corner and Ethan signaled a halt, pointing to a security camera sweeping the corridor ahead. Lila's pulse quickened. Using a small device, she jammed the signal momentarily, the red light blinking off. They slipped past, shadows amid sterile steel and muted lights. The door to the control room loomed, a thick slab of reinforced glass and steel, etched with the corporation's emblem. Layla took a deep breath and tapped her wrist console, fingers flying as she bypassed the biometric locks. The door hissed open, revealing Dr. Vell seated behind a sleek console, fingers steepled, eyes cold behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Welcome, Ms. Morgan," he said smoothly, voice calm but carrying an edge of menace. "I wondered when you'd arrive." Lila stepped inside, gaze unwavering. "Your experiments end here, Vell. I have the data to prove everything." He smiled thinly. "You think exposing the truth will undo progress? Control is evolution. Something you hackers fail to grasp. Words were their weapons now, each testing the other's resolve, probing for weakness." But the calm shattered as an alarm blared, red lights flooding the room. Javier Cruz and a squad of security operatives stormed in, weapons raised. Without hesitation, Lila dove behind a console, Ethan intercepting a guard charging toward her. The room erupted into chaos, a deadly dance of fists and hacking, the flicker of gunfire, and the clatter of shattered glass. Layla's hands flew over her deck, overriding security protocols and opening digital backdoors. She hacked cameras, locked doors, and disrupted the communications of their attackers. The battle was brutal, every second a fight for survival and control. Breathing heavily, bruised and bleeding, Lila reached the mainframe terminal. Her vision blurred, fingers trembling as she uploaded the incriminating files. The broadcast began live, unfiltered, impossible to silence. Outside, the world began to awaken to the truth. Inside, the room fell silent save for the steady beep of the system confirming transmission. Layla slumped against the console, exhaustion and relief mingling in her chest. Dr. Vell's face twisted in rage and disbelief as his empire crumbled with the click of a button. Yet, beneath it all, a flicker of something else, respect perhaps, for the hacker who dared to defy him. Layla's journey was far from over, but in this moment, she had reclaimed a piece of her fractured identity and struck a blow for freedom. The skyscraper's 10 hidden floors would no longer be a prison for secrets. "This isn't the end," she whispered to the empty room. "It's just the beginning." Outside, the city lights flickered, reflecting in the glass facade of the skyscraper silent witnesses to a revolution sparked 10 floors below. Lila Morgan's fingers hovered for a moment over the keyboard, the air thick with tension. Outside, the city pulsed with oblivious life, unaware that the truth was about to shatter their fragile peace. She took a steadying breath, the weight of months of risk and sacrifice pressing in on her. Tonight, the silence would break. With a final keystroke, the encrypted files began to stream live, bypassing firewalls and cutting through layers of corporate censorship. Lila's screen burst into a kaleidoscope of images, grainy footage of sterile chambers, cold instruments pulsating with eerie light, and data logs detailing experiments that manipulated minds and erased memories. The faces of victims, blurred but haunting, flickered across news channels citywide. A low hum of static filled the cramped room as the broadcast spread like wildfire. Ethan Shaw stood at her side, his usual easy smile replaced by a taut expression. They're watching. But this is unstoppable. Dr. Naomi Chin's delicate frame was tense but resolute. The world needs to see this. It's the only way. Miles away, in apartments, offices, and even bustling cafes, the city froze. Smartphones buzzed with notifications. Television switched to breaking news. Gasps and murmurs rose as viewers absorbed the revelations. The skyscraper's glass facade gleamed under the setting sun, an unyielding monolith that now bore the weight of exposed secrets. News anchors struggled to maintain composure as the footage continued. "This is unprecedented," one intoned, voice wavering. A luxury building hiding a sub-basement where mind control experiments were conducted on unsuspecting residents. Officials in government offices watched in alarm, phones ringing off the hook. Urgent meetings convened behind closed doors, the foundations of trust between public and power shaking. Orders were whispered, investigations launched, and media outlets prepared for the storm. Back in the sub-basement, Layla's heart raced as alarms began to blare. Security forces alerted to the breach. But among the chaos, a rare smile touched her lips. She had done it, the truth was out. Ethan's voice was steady, but edged with urgency. "We need to move. They'll be here any second." Naomi nodded, her eyes gleaming with fierce hope. "For the first time, people know. That's power." Lila stood and gazed one last time at the glowing screens, their digital rebellion woven into the fabric of the city. The battle was far from over, but a crack had formed in the corporate armor. As footsteps thundered down the corridor, she felt a surge of defiance. This was only the beginning. "They thought they could control minds without consequence," Lila whispered, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "But control is a fragile thing. And today we broke the silence." The door slammed open and the shadows of security guards spilled into the room. Lila squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. In the war for truth and freedom, every second counted. Outside, the city's pulse quickened with the shockwave of revelation. Somewhere in the depths, 10 floors below, a new chapter was just beginning. Below, the skyscraper she had once called home was now a fortress under siege, not by soldiers but by scrutiny. Swarms of media vans, government agents, and curious onlookers clogged the streets, their bright lights and persistent questions illuminating a truth that had long been buried 10 floors below ground. She pulled her coat tighter, her sharp gaze drifting across the chaotic scene. The broadcast had shattered the illusion of safety and control. The revelation of mind control experiments hidden beneath the luxury glass and steel facade had rocked corporations and governments alike. But the price of that truth was etched into the lines around her eyes and the tightness in her chest. Inside a sterile interrogation room not far away, Dr. Marcus Vell sat with the impeccable composure that had made him so terrifying. His thin-rimmed glasses caught the harsh overhead light as he met the gaze of the questioning officers. Calm, cold, unrepentant, he was a man who believed in his vision, no matter the cost. The corporate board's once shadowy puppet master was now exposed, but his silence was a promise that the fight was far from over. Back in the cramped safe house, Ethan Shaw was busy patching up the bruises on Lila's hands, remnants of their last violent encounter with security loyalists. His rugged charm was dimmed by fatigue, the reckless spark in his eyes now tempered by caution. "You've pushed yourself too hard," he muttered, handing her a bandage. Layla shook her head, fingers still trembling as she resumed scanning the hacked data streams on her laptop. The evidence they'd gathered was more than proof it was a weapon. Yet the lurking threat in every shadow reminded them that exposure was just the beginning. Dr. Naomi. Chion's voice trembled as she addressed a small gathering of activists and journalists in a discreet location. Her delicate features, framed by the sterile light of the room, betrayed the anxiety beneath her professional exterior. "This is not just about technology," she said steadily. "It's about the sanctity of human identity and the ethical boundaries we must defend. The damage done here will ripple for years, but hope lies in vigilance and transparency." Outside, Javier Cruz, Marcus's former security chief, moved like a shadow, silent, imposing, and unwavering. Though the mastermind was detained, Cruz's loyalty had not wavered. His presence was a constant reminder that the corporate forces they had dismantled still wielded power in the dark. Leila knew he was watching, waiting for a misstep. The days that followed were a blur of interviews, encrypted communications, and covert meetings. Layla found herself caught between the exhilaration of victory and the weight of survival. Memories once fractured by manipulation slowly pieced themselves together, but the scars remained raw. Trust was a fragile commodity. Every ally was a potential risk. One evening, as the rain fell again in steady sheets, Lila sat alone with Ethan and Naomi in their hideout. The glow of the laptop screen illuminated their weary faces. "This isn't over," Lila said quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "They'll come after us. We need a plan not just to survive, but to keep fighting." Ethan nodded, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "We've exposed the monster, but the head's just been cut off. The body still writhes." Naomi added, "And the science, the technology won't disappear overnight. We have to be the ones who set the rules now." Outside, the city pulsed with restless energy, a place forever changed by the revelations buried 10 floors below. Layla's journey had taken her into the darkest depths of human consciousness and corporate greed. Now, standing amid the ruins of deception, she faced a new challenge: rebuilding trust, reclaiming identity, and guarding freedom in a world still hungry for control. As the night deepened, her eyes flicked to the window. Somewhere in the shadows, the next move was being made. And she would be ready. The fight was far from over. But Layla Morgan was no longer alone, and this time she would not be silenced. She sat hunched on the edge of a worn couch, hands trembling as she cycled through fragmented holographic memories, ghostly faces, half-remembered conversations, and places she could no longer be sure were real or implanted. The sleek, clinical glow of the images contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside her mind. It had been weeks since the broadcast, since the world had glimpsed the dark underbelly of the skyscraper and the sinister experiments conducted 10 floors below. The fallout had shaken corporations and governments alike, but for Layla, the victory was bittersweet. The battle had left scars deeper than any physical wound. Her memories, once a sanctuary of certainty, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. Her phone buzzed softly on the glass table. Ethan's name illuminated the screen. She hesitated, fingers hovering before swiping to answer. "Lila, you okay?" Ethan's voice was steady, but the concern was unmistakable. She exhaled slowly, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. "I don't know anymore. Sometimes I look at these memories and I can't tell if they're mine or some fabrication." "You're not alone in this," Ethan said, his tone firm yet gentle. "We'll get through it. You're stronger than you think." The promise of support was a fragile lifeline, but Lila's distrust lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had always been fiercely independent, reluctant to let anyone close. The betrayal by corporations had taught her that trust could be a weapon used against you. Later that night, a soft knock echoed through her apartment. Dr. Naomi Chun stepped inside, her presence tentative but resolute. She carried a small medical kit, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I've been running some tests," Naomi began, her voice low. "The memory fragmentation you're experiencing isn't just psychological. There are neurological disruptions consistent with the treatments used in the sub-basement." Layla listened, the clinical explanation doing little to soothe the turmoil inside. Yet Naomi's empathy offered a rare comfort, a reminder that beneath the cold technology, human cost endured. "You're not broken beyond repair," Naomi said softly. "There's a way to stabilize your memories, to reclaim parts of yourself stolen by them, But it will take time, and it won't be easy. The path ahead was daunting. Each step toward healing meant confronting the shadows of her past and the lingering presence of those who sought to control her. But Leela knew retreat was not an option. Days later, in the solitude of the skyscraper's communal lounge, Lila faced a shattered mirror. The fractured reflection staring back was a mosaic of pain and resilience. She touched the cold glass, feeling the jagged edges beneath her fingertips. "Who am I now?" she whispered. The question hung in the air, unanswered but charged with the fierce determination that had carried her through every trial. The fight for identity was far from over, but Leela Morgan was no longer just a survivor. She was a warrior reclaiming her fractured self. Outside, the city pulsed with neon light and endless possibility. 10 floors below, the echoes of control still whispered. But above all, Layla's resolve burned brighter than ever, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of another day, Layla allowed herself a moment of fragile hope. The journey was far from complete, but she had taken the first step toward healing, and that was enough to keep the fire alive. The fractured reflections would not define her. She would piece herself together, one shard at a time, until the whole was stronger than ever before. And when the shadows came calling again, Lila Morgan would be ready. For the first time in months, she allowed the walls she had so meticulously built around herself to thin, if only slightly. Ethan sat across from her, his easy smile tempered by the seriousness behind his eyes. The city beyond the window blurred into streaks of gold and gray, indistinct and distant, as if the world had momentarily paused to give her this fragile moment. Ethan began, his voice soft but steady. "For someone who's been running from everything, you've done more than most could imagine. But you don't have to do it alone." Layla's fingers traced the rim of her cup, the warmth grounding her. "I'm not used to this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Trust doesn't come easy when your memories aren't your own, and every shadow feels like a threat." He nodded, leaning in, his gaze unwavering. "I get that. But maybe it's time to stop fighting yourself. You've got people who want to help." The vulnerability in her chest was both terrifying and oddly comforting. She had spent so long wrapped in skepticism, but the weight of isolation was heavier than she'd allowed herself to admit. Later that evening, Layla found herself in Naomi's cramped apartment, a stark contrast to the sterile corridors of the sub-basement that haunted her memories. The room was cluttered with research papers, medical journals, and flickering screens displaying streams of data. Naomi stood near a battered desk, her delicate features drawn tight with concentration as she explained the latest findings. "The technology they're using," Naomi said quietly, "it's more invasive than we thought. Not just memory erasure, but emotional conditioning, rewiring how people feel and react. The human cost is devastating." Layla listened, absorbing every word, the urgency of their mission settling over her like a mantle. Despite the danger, the presence of someone else who understood, who shared her burden, was a balm to her frayed nerves. Days passed, and small moments of connection began to stitch together the torn fabric of her existence. Mildred Hayes, the elderly concierge whose sharp eyes had once only seemed a nuisance, now became a quiet ally. In the dimly lit lobby, the rustle of paper was almost imperceptible as Mildred slipped a folded note into Layla's hand. The words inside hinted at hidden access points and vulnerabilities in the buildings, security precious intelligence wrapped in the trust of an unexpected friendship. As dusk melted into night, Lila often found herself on the rooftop, the city sprawling beneath her like a glittering web of possibility and peril. The cool wind tugged at her dark hair, carrying with it the distant sounds of life and the faint pulse of neon lights. Here, away from prying eyes and digital eyes alike, she allowed herself to breathe. The tangled weight of paranoia loosened, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of connection and purpose. "Trust," she murmured to the night sky, "isn't just a gift. It's a choice." And for the first time in a long time, Layla was ready to choose it. But with trust came risk. Every alliance, every shared secret, was a thread that could be pulled to unravel her fragile defenses. The enemies she'd made, corporate shadows lurking just beyond the edges of her awareness, would not hesitate to exploit any weakness. Yet the alternative was isolation, a slow suffocation that had nearly claimed her sanity. The chapter closed on Lila's quiet resolve, the rooftop lights flickering behind her like distant beacons. The fight was far from over, but she was no longer alone. And sometimes that was enough to keep the darkness at bay. Tomorrow, she thought, we take back more than memories. We take back trust. Her journey was far from finished, but this night marked a new beginning. The apartment, once a refuge of solitude, now felt like a cage watched from all directions. Her fingers tapped relentlessly, chasing digital ghosts through encrypted layers, seeking anomalies in the endless data streams that flowed through the skyscraper's network. It had been weeks since the broadcast had shaken the foundations of corporate power, exposing Dr. Marcus Vell's horrific experiments. Yet the victory felt hollow. The skyscraper's facade gleamed with polished denial, but beneath that surface, Lila sensed the echoes of control reverberating in the silence. The mind control technology she discovered had not been eradicated, it simply evolved. A series of subtle glitches in the building systems hinted at nanoscale neural implants, devices so small they slipped past conventional scanners. The corporation's reach had shifted into shadows, weaving its influence through invisible tendrils inside residents' minds. Layla's pulse quickened as she realized the scope of the battle ahead. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime-in encrypted message from Naomi Shun. They arranged a meeting in a discreet location, far from prying eyes and ears. When Lila arrived, Naomi's delicate frame was tense, her usually composed demeanor frayed by the weight of new discoveries. "They're moving to neural implants," Naomi whispered, glancing nervously at the doorway. "Tiny devices injected under the skin, capable of subtle manipulation. They're harder to detect, harder to remove?" Layla nodded, the cold dread settling deeper in her chest. "It means we're dealing with an invisible enemy now. Our usual tools won't be enough." Ethan Shaw joined them later, his tall frame blending into the shadows as he shared his observations from the building's perimeter. Security measures had intensified, biometric scanners replaced keycards. Surveillance cameras with facial recognition upgraded to track micro-expressions. Every corner of the skyscraper was a cage made of glass and data. Together, they forged a plan to probe the new defenses, aware that every step forward invited retaliation. The tension was palpable as they moved through the cold corridors, haunted by the knowledge that control could come from inside their own minds. One evening, as Lila navigated a deserted floor searching for a data relay, a figure emerged from the darkness. Javier Cruz, Marcus Vell's relentless security chief. His presence was an ominous reminder that the battle was far from over. "You shouldn't be here," Javier said, his voice low and steady. The harsh overhead lights cast his face into stark relief, every muscle taut with menace. Lila met his gaze with equal defiance. "Neither should you." The silence between them crackled with unspoken threats. Then, without warning, Javier stepped aside, a subtle acknowledgement that the lines of control were blurring, that even the enforcers were caught in the expanding web of uncertainty. Back in the safety of her apartment, Lila stared out at the cityscape, the weight of the ongoing fight pressing down on her. The echoes of control whispered from every corner, digital shadows, fractured memories, unseen invasions. Yet beneath the unease burned a steely resolve. The fight for autonomy was no longer just about exposing secrets. It was about reclaiming the sanctity of the mind itself. She typed a message to Ethan and Naomi, her words brief but charged with determination. "We adapt or we lose everything." Outside, the skyscraper stood tall, a beacon of wealth and power. But 10 floors below, amidst the flickering screens and humming machines, the true battle for freedom raged on, unseen but no less fierce. Lila Morgan was ready to face it, whatever it took. As the night deepened, a new alert flashed on her screen. Someone or something was watching. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The fight was far from over. Lila Morgan stood at the head of the table, her piercing gaze sweeping across a diverse assembly of activists, legal experts, and journalists. The glow of multiple projectors cast ghostly images of confidential documents, encrypted files, and hidden camera footage onto the walls, painting a damning picture of the corporation's crimes. What you see here is not just surveillance, Lila began, her voice steady and clear despite the gravity of the moment. It's a deliberate assault on freedom, identity, and human dignity. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Faces reflected the flickering images, some registering shock, others a hardening resolve. Ethan Shaw leaned against a nearby table, his rugged features drawn tight in concentration. "We've been silent for too long," he added, "but now, with this evidence, we have the power to demand change." The meeting was more than a gathering, it was a turning point. Plans were laid out to distribute the data securely to media outlets worldwide, ensuring the corporation's reach could no longer shield its darkest secrets. But the risks were clear. Every transmission was a gamble, inviting cyberattacks and reprisals. Still, Lila's determination was unshaken. She knew the fight had only just begun. Later, in a cramped room filled with the glow of monitors and the rhythmic clack of keyboards, Lila and Ethan coordinated the live stream that would bring the scandal to millions. The cybernetic pulse of the city outside seemed distant here, replaced by the urgent digital battle unfolding on screen. Firewalls cracked and reformed like shifting fortresses as waves of attacks assailed their network. "They're trying to shut us down," Ethan grunted, eyes fixed on the cascading lines of code. "But we're not going anywhere." Layla's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing blocks, rerouting data, amplifying the broadcast. The world was watching now, and the veil was lifting from the skyscraper's shadowy underbelly. Messages of support and outrage flooded in, each a spark fanning the flames of resistance. Parallel to the digital onslaught, Dr. Naomi Chen faced a different kind of battlefield. Standing before a panel of regulatory officials, she recounted the harrowing human cost of the experiments. Her voice trembled at first, betraying the weight of years spent in silent complicity, but grew stronger with each word. "These are not just data points," she implored. "They are lives, families shattered, minds stolen." The cold sterility of the chamber clashed with the raw emotion Naomi conveyed, forcing the panel to confront uncomfortable truths. Calls for investigations and reforms echoed off the polished walls. Naomi's testimony became a beacon for ethical responsibility, galvanizing momentum for change. Outside the skyscraper, the city's neon glow mingled with the rising sun as crowds gathered, their chants a chorus of defiance. Signs bearing slogans like "Memory is sacred" and "Stop mind control" bobbed in the cyberpunk haze. Holographic news reports flickered above, broadcasting live images of the protest and the unfolding scandal. Hope was tangible here, electric in the air. Yet, amid the victories, shadows lurked. The corporation's loyalists whispered threats, and unseen eyes tracked the movement's every step. Layla knew this was no simple battle, but a war for the soul of a society teetering on the edge of technological domination. As dawn broke over the city skyline, Lila allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The journey had been harrowing, memory fragments pieced together, betrayals uncovered, lives risked and lost. But now, standing at the forefront of a movement that could reshape the future, she felt an ember of hope ignite deep within. "This is just the beginning," she murmured, the weight of responsibility settling like armor around her. "We have opened the door, now we have to make sure it stays open." And with that, Lila turned back to the screens. The fight for freedom and identity far from over, her resolve burning brighter than ever. Layla Morgan sat rigidly in the chair, eyes closed, breathing shallow and uneven. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold metal, a clinical scent that contrasted sharply with the storm raging inside her mind. Fractured memories flickered like broken film reels behind her eyelids, disjointed faces, half-heard voices, and flashes of places she couldn't place. Every fragment brought with it a surge of confusion and dread. She clenched her fist, trying to anchor herself to the present, but the pull of the past was relentless. "Steady, Lila," Naomi's voice was soft but steady, a lifeline in the chaos. She adjusted a dial on the neural interface, her delicate fingers moving with careful precision. "The process is working. You're stabilizing the synaptic pathways." Lila opened her eyes slowly. The dim light revealed Naomi's pale face framed by dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. Despite the clinical setting, there was warmth in her gaze, a fragile hope that Lila desperately needed to grasp. From the corner of the room, Ethan Shaw watched intently. His tall frame was tense with vigilance, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring into action. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his rugged charm replaced by raw focus. "You're doing great," he said quietly, almost there. The memory stabilization process was invasive and exhausting. Ethan had engineered the neural interface to interface with Lila's brainwaves, working in tandem with Naomi's medical knowledge to coax her fractured memories back into coherence. The risk was high. Too much stimulation could trigger a complete mental shutdown or worse, deeper erasure. But without it, Layla's mind would remain a fractured labyrinth, vulnerable to the corporation's manipulations. Suddenly, a violent flashback seized her, a kaleidoscope of distorted images and voices screaming in discordant harmony. Layla gasped, clutching the arms of the chair as the room spun around her. Faces from her past and strangers melded into a terrifying mosaic. She felt herself slipping, drowning in the chaos of false memories and suppressed truths. "Focus on my voice," Naomi urged, moving closer with a reassuring hand on Lila's shoulder. "You're safe. You're here." Ethan quickly adjusted the interface, sending a calibrated pulse designed to ground her consciousness. Gradually, the storm subsided. Layla's breathing slowed as the fragments began to align, memories no longer shards but pieces of a clearer picture. Hours passed in this fragile balance between darkness and light. With every breakthrough, Lila felt the weight of her past lifting, replaced by a growing clarity and determination. The scars left by the corporation's experiments were deep, but not insurmountable. As dawn's first light filtered through the grimy window, Layla opened her eyes fully. She met Naomi's gentle smile and Ethan's relieved nod, a silent acknowledgement of progress hard won. "It's not over," Lila whispered, voice hoarse but resolute, "but I'm getting back to myself." Naomi nodded, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "You're stronger than they ever imagined." Ethan exhaled, the tension easing from his frame. "And we're right here with you." The journey to reclaim her mind was far from complete. Shadows of manipulation lingered at the edges, threats still looming in the corporate underworld. But for the first time in a long while, Lila felt the fragile edge of control return to her grasp, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. As the city outside stirred awake, the skyscraper loomed silent and indifferent, concealing secrets that still pulsed 10 floors below. But inside this small, battered room, a quiet rebellion took root. The fight for memory, identity, and freedom had just edged forward. And Leila Morgan was ready to face whatever came next. Her mind, once fractured and manipulated, was beginning to mend. But the question lingered like a shadow. How much of her true self could she truly reclaim before the corporation struck back? The edge of memory was a battleground, and the war was far from over. She took a slow, steadying breath and prepared herself. The fight for autonomy was just beginning, and this time she would not be broken. Leila Morgan stood on the rooftop of her skyscraper, the cool morning air brushing against her face, carrying distant sounds of a city slowly waking from slumber. Below her, the streets hummed with life cars rolling, voices rising, footsteps tapping. It was a fragile new day, one that felt less like an end and more like a cautious beginning. For the first time in months, Leila allowed herself a moment to breathe, to acknowledge the small victories rippling outward from her relentless fight. The broadcast that exposed the sinister mind control experiments had shaken the very foundations of corporate power and government complicity. News outlets dissected every detail. Social media buzzed with hashtags and heated debates. Yet shadows lingered, whispers of retaliation, subtle attempts to rewrite narratives, and unseen eyes tracking her every move. In the cramped apartment she shared with Ethan and Naomi, the trio huddled around a laptop, faces illuminated by the flickering screen. Ethan's easy smile was tempered by the weight of recent threats. Naomi's delicate features bore the strain of moral conflict, and Layla's piercing gaze scanned the endless stream of updates. "Look at this," Ethan said, pointing at a live feed of protests igniting across the city. "People are waking up. They're not just angry, they want change." Naomi nodded, her voice steady but soft. The scientific community is divided. Some demand accountability. Others fear the backlash could stall legitimate research. Lila leaned forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard. We've opened a door no one can close now, but that means the fight isn't over. They'll come for us harder, smarter, we have to be ready. The room fell into a charged silence before Ethan broke it, his tone both reassuring and earnest. We're not alone anymore. This is bigger than us. Days blurred into weeks as Lila navigated a labyrinth of public inquiries, legal battles, and covert threats. Walking through city parks, she overheard conversations, some hopeful, others steeped in suspicion. Faces reflected the complex emotions sweeping society: relief, fear, anger, and an aching desire for justice. A skyscraper, once a prison of secrets, had become a symbol of resistance. Yet, every victory was shadowed by the cost she bore. Memories still fractured, trust remained a fragile currency, and the scars both visible and hidden reminded her of what had been sacrificed. On quiet nights, by the dim glow of a solitary lamp, Lila would write in her journal, her hands trembling as she poured thoughts of loss, identity, and the faint flame of hope onto the page. Resistance isn't just about fighting, she wrote one evening. It's about holding on to who you are when everything tries to take it away. Her resolve hardened with each word. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers lurking beneath every digital shadow and whispered conversation. But amid the chaos, a flicker of hope endured, a fragile light kindled by the courage to confront darkness and reclaim autonomy. As the city pulsed with the first true breath of change, Lila Morgan stood ready. Not as a solitary hacker lost in the labyrinth of her past, but as a beacon for those who dared to resist, to remember, and to fight for the freedom of mind and spirit. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, she believed the future might just be worth it. And with that belief, she stepped forward into the uncertain dawn, a flicker of hope lighting the way. Dawn was breaking, washing the city below in hues of pale gold and lavender. She paused at the edge, the cool metal railing steady beneath her hands, and gazed out at the sprawling urban landscape, an endless sea of lights dimming as the sun claimed the sky. The air smelled faintly of rain and concrete, a blend so familiar yet now carrying the weight of everything she had endured. 10 floors below, beneath layers of steel and secrecy, the sub-basement lay silent. The place where her life had been shattered and remade, where memory had been a battleground and identity a contested prize. Lila's thoughts were a tangled web of images and emotions, fragments of faces, whispers of erased moments, the cold gaze of Dr. Marcus Vell, and the fierce determination that had driven her through every dark corridor and encrypted firewall. She had come so far, yet the journey was far from over. The broadcast had shaken the world awake, exposing the monstrous experiments and the corporate greed that had fueled them. Governments scrambled, investigations launched, and the skyscraper's walls began to close in on the culpable. But the shadows lingered. The technology remained, and so did the people who would wield it. Turning away from the edge, Lila slipped back into her apartment, a sanctuary that now felt both familiar and alien. Screens flickered with streams of data, decrypted files, and recovered memory fragments. Each piece was a shard of a shattered past she was painstakingly reconstructing. Sitting at the desk, fingers trembling slightly, she scrolled through images of herself, some real, some implanted, trying to anchor her identity in the sea of uncertainty. The ache was sharp, a reminder that the cost of resistance was etched deep into her psyche. A soft knock interrupted her solitude. Ethan's familiar silhouette appeared in the doorway, his easy smile tempered by exhaustion. Behind him, Naomi Chun stepped silently, her eyes reflecting a quiet resolve. They gathered around the table, a fragile circle of trust forged in the fires of shared struggle. "We're not done," Ethan said simply, voice steady but weary. "The fight's just changed." Naomi nodded, fingers tapping on the keyboard. "There are still traces, fragments of the technology, pockets of surveillance. We'll need to dismantle them, piece by piece." Layla looked between them, feeling the weight of their support and the fragile hope it inspired. "Then we keep pushing. For the ones who can't fight. For the truth that still hides in the dark." Together they planned into the night. The glow of the laptop casting shadows that danced on the wall, shadows that no longer lurked with menace, but with possibility. Days later, Layla found herself wandering the sterile halls of the sub-basement. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint hum of dormant machinery. She traced a hand along the cold metal walls, feeling the chill seep into her bones. This place had been a prison for minds and bodies alike, a crucible of control and manipulation. But now it was a monument to resistance. Her footsteps echoed softly as she moved through the corridors, memories flooding back in bursts: fear, pain, courage. She remembered the faces of those lost to the experiments, the whispered promises of freedom and the burning need to reclaim autonomy. Lila closed her eyes, drawing a steadying breath. "I am still me," she whispered, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "And I will fight to keep it that way." Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the battles waged beneath its gleaming surface. But Leela Morgan was awake, now vigilant, unyielding, a beacon for those who dared to resist. 10 floors below had tested her, broken her, and remade her. And from those depths she emerged, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. As the sun rose higher, spilling light across the skyline, Lila stepped forward. The war for minds was far from over, but so was her fight. And in that moment, beneath the vast expanse of sky, she found something precious: hope.